Hello and welcome to Movie of the Year, Best of the Year, 2023, movies. My name is Ryan, and I will be your host for this. What's one more than penultimate? This is ultimate.
Ultimate,
Ryan?
Ultimate and extreme. You can call me that, Greg. Go ahead.
But you're the ultimate Ryan the way Blob was the ultimate Blob in Ultimatum, where he's gross and nobody liked him and he ate people.
That's Mike. Mike is here. I'll introduce the rest of the people later, but my name is Ryan, and we are here to figure out what is, for finals forever, the single greatest movie of 2023. We are predating the Oscars when we record this. I have no idea when it will come out. But if you're about to watch the Oscars, stop. This is all you need to listen to. We have done TV comedy. Congratulations to The Bear. We have done TV drama. Congratulations to Succession. Both of those should be switched, but that's okay. Horror film of the year was Godzilla -1, and Caroline Polachek took down the album. But now it is time to see what is the best in the greatest pop culture medium of them all, movies. Mike, you are here and have already brought up a much maligned comic book from 15 years ago. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here to do. I'll also be talking about fine art from 100 years ago that's maligned. Orchestral pieces from 200 years ago that are maligned. I'm trying to think of what other mediums there are.
Well, while you work out the rest of this bit, Greg is also here. Hey, Greg, thanks for also being here.
I am more than happy to be here, Ryan, to give it all up for the movies, books that you watch in 2 hours.
Books! I forgot about books.
Yeah, never forget about books. Well, you can forget about books now that we have these movies. This is basically reading, and you're smart if you watch these. So congratulations.
Some of the movies involved reading directly.
Cannot disagree with any of that. Greg and Mike, you are my two Movie of the Year compatriots. What do you think? Do you think that it's better to spend 4 months on a year and get into the nitty-gritty and then decide a winner, or is it just best to pack it all into one night?
One night. Let's do one night forever. Every week will be a new year. 16 movies.
Yeah, you can't just no frittering about. We just have one night to do this, have to get it done, and I think that there's a purity to that. We'll come away with a good decision based more on instinct than on 4 months of overthinking it. Not to put our
The Clockwork Orange method is the best, right? For viewing all films. Just hold your lids open and go to town. Make decisions.
Well, okay. Greg and Mike have to contractually be here and watch all this shit, but there are two people who didn't. They did it because of the kindness of their hearts and the fat bonus check they were both sent. Let's start with Kate. Kate, you were here. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I do it for the love of the game. And I didn't remember that until this year. I don't think I've liked a movie in like 4 years. It used to be such a big part of my personality. I used to only watch movies and talk about how I watched movies. And I don't know, maybe it was the pandemic, maybe it was just growing up. I just didn't care. And doing this has made me care about seeing movies again. So thank you guys.
I think that we're still at the point where anything you want to blame on the pandemic, you can. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
When you said that you used to talk about watching movies, did you ever bring up a specific one, or would you only tell people that you did watch movies and that was the conversation?
No, I found it was much more impressive to talk about film in like an abstract and terrifying way.
Celluloid,
that seemed to make for a better conversation, yeah.
Perfect. Our other superstar guest star is Nate. Nate, are you seriously here?
Oh, I'm totally here. It's amazing.
Is it really?
Look at me.
You were walking around outside the studio at the star-studded event. Can you tell us about any of the celebrities you saw tonight?
Most of the people that I was well, I won't say that, following around for journalistic purposes, may or may not have legal orders that limit the distance I could get, so I couldn't really ask about designers or anything, but it was star-studded.
Yes. Every designer designed a star-studded outfit for each person to wear. It's just
Nate, if there's one celebrity, I'm so sorry to cut in, Ryan, but Nate, if there's one celebrity who should take out some sort of restraining order just based on your attention, who is it?
Ooh, based on my attention, jeez.
If we're talking celebrities, I would, and based on how Nate has already acted, I would say Ryan and Greg and Kate and Mike.
Yeah.
It seems like it. Yeah.
I'm literally outside their houses all at the same time. It's amazing. But I've cracked technology to do this. Just look, we don't need to talk about it now.
I wish we wouldn't. Mike, let's go back to you. Sort of generic question that hopefully you can shape into something interesting.
How was this year in movies? I'm sorry, go. What was your question?
Did you yawn and say that?
We'll see.
Is this the best year for movies in a long time?
In the longest of times, Ryan, this was a great year for movies of every kind and cloth and color. We often talk about here at Movie of the Year that a movie can be so many things, and the 8 we will be talking about this evening are so many different kinds of things. And I'd say 6 of them deserve to be on this list.
Uh-oh.
So we won't get into details, but is that where you guys, everybody else, is that where you're feeling is like, is anybody thinking like all 8 of these is a tie for first? Or can you pick out a couple of, not stinkeroos, but averagearoos?
Yeah, there's a couple that I can make a pretty strong case against their inclusion, and would have actually said like, hey, if we could go back and repick the bracket, maybe we should have done that differently.
Movies can be so many different things, and I think we tried to celebrate, everything that movies were in 2023, so that like every aspect of the movies could have their say, and that might mean that some stand less a chance of winning, but that they deserved representation for their popularity and contribution to everybody's like discourse, I guess.
But for 6 or so to have a chance, that's not typically how we come into an 8-thing bracket. Like usually we have a a sure shot and then maybe a dark horse. 6 is still pretty good.
And
It feels good. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, I wonder, going back to the 4 months versus one night, is if we had 4 months to chew, would it be clear that, no, there's actually is a clear front runner and maybe a dark horse? Or do we do it wrong the other nights and we're like, oh, I don't know, is it Ghostbusters? But because you have too long to think about it.
Kate?
I think that, in general, the 6 or all 8 were interesting to talk about. And I think that that's what I'm excited to get into, because even though there are some of these films that I don't think I'm going to bring with me outside of 2023, they definitely reminded me of how many different types of experiences I can have in the cinema. And so, sure, some of them feel kind of like pretentious and forgettable long term, but tonight's the night to talk about them. You know what I mean?
Tonight is the night. I would, if you're at home and you're playing a drinking game, I would drink every time you hear this movie should have been All of Us Strangers, or this movie should have been American Fiction. I feel like those are the 2 that
notably
would have rounded out this 8.
We all clearly agree that there's 6 good movies and 2 bad movies, and I think we're all assuming that we are to have the same 6 and 2, and it'll be interesting to know
I
whether
think there's a difference. Yeah, I think it might not be the same.
Yeah. I've been actually, Ryan, you mentioned your stomach being in knots earlier, maybe before we even started the episode. But, I've been doing that for the last few days, thinking like, do I have a hot take for the group, or is my take going to be very lukewarm? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to say something that you think is really smart and interesting and hot, and then everybody's like, you fucking stupid piece of shit. That's what everybody's already said. Nate, do you think that this is the kind of year that brings movies back into the center of pop culture in a way that they haven't been even since before the pandemic?
I think so, mainly because we have seen the waning of kind of the superhero / whatever kind of popcorny genre of movie that was drawing people seldom to the theater, right? We'll come to see a Marvel movie, but I don't go to movies, quote unquote, otherwise. I feel like all of these were very unique theater experiences that really rewarded seeing them in a movie theater. And, post-pandemic too, a lot of my thing was like, hey, I noticed that in going to see a lot of these movies, I was like, wow, maybe I'm over my like public space anxiety around being in just like rooms full of people to do a thing. And then it was like, shit, I love the audience experience, and I miss it. You can watch a movie on your couch, but you don't feel the vibe of people experiencing, I mean, everything from the heaviest of these movies to the lightest. There's something fun about being around other people when they see it.
I miss sitting next to people, Greg, and you can tell me about this, while Emma Stone gets railed for 45 minutes straight.
Yeah, this is the only movie I did see in theaters was Poor Things, and me and some guy who I probably never see again just sat right next to each other and just watched every part of that movie, and it was just like, man, I did not miss this aspect of this experience. It feels weird to be so close to somebody I don't know right now.
I can't wait to get into that, Greg. I have so many ideas. There's so much to talk about there, but put a pin in it.
A lot to unpack.
There's a lot to unpack. Yeah.
I do think that Marvel movies aside, this was a terrible year for Marvel, terrible year for Disney in general. Star Wars had nothing to offer on the big screen. The DCEU came to an end. None of these movies would have made it on the bracket necessarily, but it does scare people. Greg, can you tell our listeners about what it was like to live through, or imagine you're talking to your grandkids, live through Barbenheimer, and could that be the key to it all?
It was a fun time. It felt like there was so much general enthusiasm about movies, and it felt like a bunch of different groups coming together to celebrate movies all at the same time. And then it felt nice that it was good for movies. I don't know if that's a tacky thing to say, but the idea that it was something that was supporting just films themselves was fun. But I don't think we'll ever see another experience quite like it. I don't think that it's going to be easy to generate that again.
It's funny that one is based on a toy and the other is a biopic of a real person, and yet IP has gone so far that we're still no, these are very original movies. And I do think that there was a message there of we don't want to see the fourth version of something. We don't want to see reboots or rehashes. Even though they were based on other things, the originality was there, and people showed the fuck up for it, which is really cool. Did anybody see both movies in theaters on the same day or close to each other?
No, that would break me emotionally.
I liked the idea of it, but the truth is I don't live in the same state as my sisters. They both live in Arizona, and it was such an explicit wish of my sisters to see the Barbie movie together. And I have, the three of us, we grew up in the same household, but have had very different experiences growing up. My older sister's 9 years older. She's technically my half sister. And it's one of the few childhood things that was able to kind of bridge. We would all play Barbies together at one point. And I don't think there are very many other cultural things that I shared with my sisters at the same time in the same house. And because of that, I waited to see with them, and it definitely changed my experience of watching that movie. I think for the better. But I guess we gotta wait till Barbie's up.
Put a pin in it,
else.
Kate.
Yeah. Why am I
doing?
talking? I'm
Kate wants to talk about movies so bad.
I want to talk about movies so bad.
No free ads, and by ads I
Yeah.
mean your opinions on things. Kate, over the last couple of years, it seems like the streamers, which are constantly hemorrhaging money, are sort of getting out of the game of we're going to pay a ton of money for an auteur to come and direct. So the theater aside, with the theaters not doing great and then the streamers saying no to this, does this scare you about independent film and the sort of art that we got to watch this year? Will we ever have a bracket this good again? And please say yes.
Oh, I think absolutely, because different pressures will be applied. I think what we saw this year was what it looks like for a bunch of artists who have had a lot of time to actually think about the stories they want to tell when they have the chance to tell it, come to the stage at the same time. On some level, I have no clue. I have no data to back that up. I don't know how many of these movies were conceived pre-2020 but executed post-pandemic, how long these things were in the making. But to me, what the kind of takeaway was this is what happens when people remember how lucky we are to make things with each other, and how lucky we are to even offer the experience of going to a cinema and experiencing an emotion together. So to me, like, it might not be the exact same. It might not be the same for a while, but this was a special year for film for that reason.
Especially considering strikes and
Yeah.
schedules and whatnot.
Exactly. It's not always got to be like a biohazard. There will be different things. So even this conversation about streamers and their relationship to auteurs and that drying up, like, yeah, on some level that awareness probably informed the way Greta Gerwig dealt with Barbie. Like, this was her chance with a big budget to do something creative. And so,
And-
it's interesting.
Was Barbie a success? We still don't know. Time will tell,
Yeah.
I guess.
Time will tell.
Is there something, though, that bums you guys out about, so Mike, I'll go to you first, that so many of these auteurs, these great, like, let's talk David Fincher, whose movie The Killer did not sniff the bracket, but went straight to Netflix. Do you see this as a good thing, or like, are you kind of bummed that this is where everybody's coming now?
It's the reason it's a bit of a bummer is because maybe it's that we are not a Netflix household, but I'm around people who talk about things a lot, and it came and went. It felt like it was a mass dropped whole season of a show that people talked about for a day and then disappeared, versus if something's in the theaters, it has time to build up and the conversations continue. But yeah, I don't know a single person who said word one about The Killer.
These 8 movies, all 8 of them, were very big in my bubble. But like, as far as like, nieces and nephews or parents, moms and dads, did these register with them?
2 of them did. Barbenheimer did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of these other
And then
ones, I
the-
think that like normies don't even have not even heard of.
But that's normal because these are almost all Oscar nominated. So the zones of interest, we're never going to get the aunts and uncles, moms and dads, and nieces and nephews on board.
And if they are excited about it, it's probably for the wrong reason.
Yeah, come
Hey,
on,
wait.
Jimmy. We told you can't have that haircut.
Awesome.
I do think that
Kate?
all other ideas can be saved. Ryan, you were about to nail this transition.
No, it's
Show me your magic.
into another question, and now
Tony
you have
Hawk
to,
this shit.
you have to answer this, Kate. Oh, I'm going to do the little, what's the up-down move, where you just sort of, you're on your 2 back wheels until the next thing you
manual?
do? I'm going to do a
The jump?
manual
Yeah, do the
right into this.
manual
No.
into a
Kate-
rail slide.
Watching all of these 8 movies recently, and then after Kate, anybody can go. That's my gift to the 3 dudes. Watching all 8 of these movies recently, and then looking at this year that is your return to movies. Are they talking about 2023? When we look back in 2023, will this be the year when movies talked about blank?
I do think that these movies are all tied in that they are discussing how our past informs our future in one way or the other. I know that's a very vague thing, but I think the truth is these are all movies that are born of minds that now have the experience of the pandemic, the experience of surviving something, the experience of a world-altering discovery, a paradigm shift. Like, these are all movies that are kind of discussing paradigm shifts, whether it's like in a very domestic or personal space like Anatomy of a Fall, or if it's something like The Atomic Age. We're discussing the stories we tell ourselves once we understand that there has been a change, which I guess is storytelling in general. And maybe that's why 2023 is interesting, or is this return to kind of almost classic forms over and over again in these different ways. It's a time where we're thinking about how we're going to talk about what we just went through, and who that made us. And I think that those themes I see in, I think, all of these movies.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think that you are describing storytelling, but also you're talking about these 8 movies that are coming out as more and more schools are literally getting rid of history books and talking about the past. And so it's not necessarily about, we do have period pieces here where they're literally talking about it, but like the whole, like, is it important to remember what's happened? Is it important to deal with the past? Like, that's something that, unfortunately, these movies will only be preaching to the choir. Anybody who is voting books about slavery out of a library is not going to watch any of these. But Nate, do you sort of get that vibe from these movies too?
They might be watching Barbie.
That's
True. Yeah, I think what's interesting is that my theory is that after we're at 30 years of internet consumption and the growth of this interconnectivity and constant like bombardment of very thin very wide content. And what we have with these movies that we've watched is personal, deep, like contemplative stories around very either current prescient issues or, you know, history deep issues that we may or may not ever resolve in any sort of satisfying way, but they're all confronting, you know, what it means to be human and have agency, what it means to be under sort of a regime and acting in it or of it, and what it means to be like listening to the bad plans your family has, whatever. Like everything is tied into these very human level, personal, deep things that are like philosophical mirror questions to hold up and look at, right? In a way that all of the Marvel stuff kind of was a distraction. Like, go, have fun, imagine yourself being a hero, be, you know, full on escapism. These movies all just subvert escapism to the greatest degree.
Except for Quantum Mania. Quantum Mania handled everything you're talking about perfectly.
Very true.
Isn't that always, I mean, is this year different, or isn't that always the films we're going to be talking about at the end of the year versus the big popcorn films?
But no, I do think that there's a point here of one thing that a lot of these movies have in common is very specifically the movies are telling us, note who is telling the story. And how does that change? You know, like that the narrator or the director or the main character or whoever it is that we're getting the perspective of, that it seems like there's a focus on this is what we think, but also it is only what we think. You
On
know?
some level, it's almost like the zeitgeist has had long enough to digest like a 2016 era identity politics. And for a while, all the conversations were about identity politics themselves, or the idea of like who can tell what story and deciding those lines. And it feels like a lot of these narratives are exploring the age-old truth that any one story is kind of from an identity.
It's all fake news, but watch out for the person who is screaming the fact that it's fake news.
Exactly.
Anybody else get any 2023 like what we're dealing with here? I think that the patriarchy is a big deal in almost all of these movies.
Oh yeah.
I hope one of them has a speech
Amen,
about
brother.
it.
Yeah.
Basically, as far as I can tell, most of them were against it.
Well, I do think it's time to make a decision. Either take it down or build it up stronger.
Yeah, because we've been like talking about how we don't like it for such a long time. I don't know. Should we do something about
man,
that?
we love it. We do love it deep down. And
If we
that's
didn't
We
like
love
it.
a patriarchy.
We love a patriarchy deep down. And that's something I was thinking while watching Oppenheimer. I was thinking about the fact that, like, as a little kid, when I still conceived of myself in a somewhat genderless way, I was fascinated with Band of Brothers. That was the post 9/11, like, army guy thing that my dad loved. And it was my, like, introduction to epic drama. And watching Oppenheimer and just remembering like how I used to play with little toy soldiers and shit, you know, it's very hard. And what I was noticing specifically was like Josh Hartnett's face and how he's aged into being a man and how much more interesting it is to watch grown men like really deal with the world on their shoulders. And I was like, I forgot everything Barbie taught me. So fast. As soon as one craggy meatloaf shows up I'm like, that guy has something interesting to tell me.
I love those actors. Josh Hartnett's one. Adam Brody is another, where you guys look 12. You had the body of a 12-year-old until you were like 40.
Yeah.
And then now you guys are you're men.
Now you're beefy. Yeah,
dude.
Exactly.
Beef
Josh
boy
Hartnett
comes
is
to
running a
town.
comb through that hair and
Beef
getting rid of the
boy.
bedhead.
Remember
Yeah,
when?
man.
Remember when Ben Affleck just like one day just turned into a fridge? I'm huge.
I
now.
know. I love it. They're immediately interesting to me.
And also how
Matt,
Tobey
I'm wicked
Maguire
huge
refuses
now.
to. Guys, I think we have no choice but to, instead of complimenting movies we love, it's time to start really insulting movies that
Negging them.
we love. Yeah, just say it in hopes that they might hook up with us later. It's time to enter the bracket and finally determine what is the single greatest movie of 2023. When we come back after the tiniest of breaks. Round one, battle one. Your number one seed is Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. The film is based on David Grant's book about how the FBI, in one of their very first cases, saved the Osage tribe from the white men who were killing them for oil-rich land. At the last second, the filmmakers decided it would be better to background the FBI and foreground a different white man, Ernest Burkhart, who married an Osage woman so he could help steal that land, but maybe, just maybe, fall in love. This movie also helped foreground the Osage people, including Lily Gladstone as Molly Burkhart, who in a very modern, very woke twist, has dialogue. Leo plays Willie, but it is Lily who is the star, stealing the movie from a litany of male actors with odd-shaped heads, including Robert De Niro, Jesse Plemons, John Lithgow, and Brendan, I won an Oscar, who cares how I act now, Fraser. Lily Gladstone's patriarchy fight is going up against the most legendary patriarchy fight in modern movie history, Barbie, which gave multiple generations of kids other words to say to their parents other than, fuck you, Dad. If you can remember back to a time before Barbie came out, you'll remember a society where we all just decided this is going to rule. And rule it did, becoming the biggest hit of 2024. Fuck you, Marvel. Fuck you, Star Wars. Fuck you, Ballads of Songbirds. Fuck you, Ballads of Snakes. This was the #1 movie of the year. The instant classic Barbie, written and directed by Greta Gerwig and starring Margot Robbie, and to a much lesser extent Ryan Gosling, tells the story of an existential toy who goes to the real world and decides that she wants to be a real girl. Half Bergman, half the Brady Bunch movie, Barbie owned the entire year and probably many more years to come. Nate. We'll start with you, Nate.
Hey, people call me Nick all the time, so that works.
I ask you this. Both movies showed how misogyny is passed down from generation until one strong woman steps up to say, hey, stop that. But Nate, what's a more reductive question than that?
The question that executives at either studio or Martin Scorsese asked themselves before making these movies. I think these are the two worst movies on the bracket for lots of reasons.
My goodness.
These are your Nate. These are your two.
These are my two. Yeah.
All
right, hold on.
Two.
Before we continue, let me give Nate a real question. What movie are you more desperate to show young kids, women and others, about what it's like to live in the country that they're currently in?
I think Barbie is the better one to show to anyone. I think Killers of the Flower Moon is... I've been mulling this over. This is going to be a harsh thing to say, but I feel like it's a Watchmen-esque failure to understand what was necessary to do with the opportunity to make it. It opens strong like Snyder's Watchmen movie does, and then it drags on and becomes the kind of Scorsese movie Scorsese likes to make, which is his boys doing crime in a kind of fun way that wraps you up, and you start recognizing, like, oh, wait, I'm enjoying them capering. I shouldn't do that. And then for some reason we drop a bunch of late 90s, early 2000s folk indie band members in, and I don't know. I think any movie that ends on Martin Scorsese buttoning his own message when it should have been more focused on the indigenous people being murdered is a failure. So I would go with Barbie.
I don't know if I agree that it's a full failure, but I do throughout the movie, and I do think out of all of his capers, look at these boys go, this was the one where I felt like he was trying to be like, no, this is serious and not fun. But I do think he's honed 80 years of doing a certain thing. He just wanted you to think about it. He also just couldn't stop showing, I will only say, his boys from now on. I agree there, where I kept being like, weird that Lily Gladstone's not in this a little more. Weird that we keep just going back to Ernest and not Molly's perspective of what's happening.
Well, the scene that killed me was Leo breaking down when he finds out that his kid has died, and that we focus on like, oh, look at what a deep hurt soul he is, and it's like, no, he's been poisoning her and murdering people. Like, I don't want to, and I get that, yeah, it's complicated, but it's not. Like, the anti-hero movie isn't the movie we needed for this particular topic, and it sort of fails the topic, I think.
I do want to point out that Lily Gladstone was nominated for Best Actress as a choice by the studio. And so the fact, if you watched it after the Oscar nominations came out, I do think that will come as a type of surprise, but it was the story that they were telling. Greg, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that he is playing with that odd sense though of the tone of it. I think that he very much is trying to answer the question of like, how do these people live with themselves? Like, there must be a reality they create for themselves that allows them to be the worst people to have ever lived. Or maybe, I mean, we'll have others later in the bracket. But, like, I think to seriously ask yourself the question of, what would that be like? What would that be like to be the people who acted this way? And then to show that they're actually not, like, evil most of the time, that instead they sit around being pleasant and joking with each other, reminds us that the true face of evil is often pleasant most of the time, and that that's just like the reality.
I mean,
I think
it's
the
hard
problem
to...
is there's another movie on this bracket that did the same thing better in half the runtime.
Yes.
And it just feels obnoxious to make a almost 4-hour long movie that dances around this and does it. I totally get it. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's really well done. I think it was very interesting. I just think it misses the mark the most out of anything else that we've got on this list.
I think that like it's really hard to watch it, or it was really hard for me to watch it and not feel him reacting to 30 years, 40 years, whatever it's been, of people liking the characters from Goodfellas and Casino and Mean Streets for all the wrong reasons. And I don't think that he two-dimensionally painted these characters in this movie in a way where like, no, can't you see how bad they are? Like, I agree with both of you guys that like it is complicated, but not in the snarky, hate-filled way that Nate said, but the like the way that Greg said of like they do sometimes have good days. There are picnics with these evil people, and that is what is so messed up. I just didn't see him. He wasn't going to do enough. Well, there's one guy in here who he's got like big eyebrows and kind of stupid. He's the one who introduces the idea of marrying an Osage woman. That guy's fucking evil, straight up. But the rest of them, like, you see the climb of how they warp their brains into becoming the people that they are.
They just don't think about it so much of the time. That's what you really see, and I think that's what is upsetting about the movie, is that they just do a really good job of not reckoning with what they're actively doing. They just kind of don't consider it.
Which is why, and I must admit, as a Sicilian woman, I've never really liked Martin Scorsese. And the truth is, I mean, I love his look. You know what I mean? I love that he looks like my uncle, and I think his glasses are fabulous. But like, in terms of filmmaking, I think he really makes his presence known in a way that's more about being like, this is me showing off my boys, as we've been saying, rather than like, for at least the past 3 decades, rather than a movie that's telling a story that's really compelling. This is probably my favorite Scorsese film, maybe ever, which isn't inherently high praise. But I do think that a couple of things, whether Scorsese meant to do them or not, were really well done. I think the conversation that we were just having even is a like pretty gorgeous story about whiteness and the paradox of whiteness. Because I think that that discomfort that we're reading, that like, how can you believe that your presence in this space is somehow good for this person, and that you can take and take and take and it'll all be okay, that you can still love your wife and be a good husband while systematically exploiting. Like, to me, this is kind of one of the most damning movies when it comes to that question I've ever seen, where, and they kind of are aware of it even in the advertisement. That line of, can you see the wolves, right? Like, that is a perfect subtitle to the conversation that this movie is having.
Isn't that Leo's nickname in the movie?
No, he's a coyote.
Oh, he's a coyote.
They say so, but it's a similar kind of energy, and the can you see the wolves is what when he's reading the children's book narrative of the Osage people and their land. It's so obviously it's underlaid under a montage where he is beating up wealthy Osage people and gambling. And I think that one of the things that makes this movie really interesting is that, then that's the first scene where you really see it, is that this is the first time I've probably ever seen Leo DiCaprio play someone fucking dumb. Like,
yes,
dumb.
The whole time I was thinking
and
that,
you're just
yes.
like, how does this make sense? Yeah, unless you see him like in real life.
Zing.
I would say that.
But
I would say that Scorsese is probably my top 3 favorite directors of all time, and all the stuff that you guys are saying, like all the complaints or nags is something that I love. Mike, when you were watching Killers, as somebody who Scorsese fan?
Some of them.
Okay, some of them.
I love Silence. I know that puts me in a weird place.
Yeah, that is weird. Silence and Age of Innocence. Two favorite Scorsese movies.
I love Age of Innocence, but that's just because it's the greatest romance of all time.
There is stuff that like is clearly too much Scorsese, and then I do think that this is one of his most restrained movies. But like, did you feel a part in this movie where it was like, oh, that is the shit right in the middle? This is my Goldilocks as far as his directing goes.
Oh yeah, there's so much of this movie I did love. It was, I think, it was the weaker parts every once in a while where I started meta thinking about it. But yeah, it's the Jesse Plemons, once he shows up, it's motoring. And also just like Lily Gladstone, except for her husband being able to read this fucking town and her just like slowly wasting away kind of on purpose while still fighting. All of that was working. I know I'm not talking about his filmmaking, but all of this was happening because he's behind the camera doing stuff like, yes. And he did a small old-timey version of his walk through like the back of a kitchen. There was a moment where we're walking through the house and there's all this chaos and there's kids. And I was like, I love it. This is like a fun wink to say I'm still here, babies.
Was it weird though that And Then He Kissed Me was still playing?
That was weird. But they did do it with like washboards and like a broom with one string, so I appreciated that. No, and filmmaking, you know what part that I loved? And maybe this is Mr. Big Eyebrows that you're talking about, Ryan, who he was the security guard in Murder at the End of the World. Is that who you're talking about, or is it somebody else?
He was the hot
yes.
one.
He was
the hot one. Him dancing his ass off and sweating so hot in that hot Oklahoma sun at the wedding. And then because I was like, this is a long movie, and there's one of those moments I went back and forth because I had 20 minutes of this scene to think about it, and I was like, well, I'd cut here. No, I kind of like how long we're sitting with this guy. No, I don't know. Do we need this? And yeah, I kind of liked, he is a minor character that we sit on his face and how much he's enjoying dancing and being so fucking dumb and so fucking hot that I don't know. There's something about that really worked for me.
The actor's last name is Cancel Me, by the way. So that's fun. The moment that like I saw this, I did make sure I saw this movie in the theater, and the moment that like I'll probably never forget, it was a pretty packed theater, was Lily Gladstone's mom going to the afterlife. That is, I would say, some of the most powerful filmmaking in his entire career. And it's not the Rolling Stones are blaring. It's not the camera is moving in a certain way. I think that he's still got it. And like the way that he is responding to his own career is incredible. Greg, can we let me go to you about the ending, which was not in the book and more heavily involves Martin Scorsese on screen than probably any other part of this movie or any other movie. Was this a good way for you to walk out of the theater, or what was the taste that was left in your mouth?
I thought it was an interesting, challenging decision. And as a framing mechanism, it reminds us that there is something about this story that is still exploitation. That like you, even when you're like, I'm going to tell it the right way and do the best job that I possibly can, and I'm going to bring some light to this, and it's important and all this stuff, that you can't fully escape the fact that you are on some level also arriving at this place of pain and devastation, and you are like ginning something up out of that pain and devastation, and you are turning it into entertainment, and you're turning it into a product, and you're turning it into sales, and like we can't wash our hands of that, so let's at least like admit to it. And I don't know that does anything, but it just reminds you, the viewer, on the way out the door, like, hey, don't forget, we're kind of bullshit too.
Yeah, and like, did your respect rise because he clearly knows that, or did it seem like what Mike calls 8 miling, where I'm going to criticize myself before you get a chance to?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, these things are like a spectrum, and it falls somewhere in between those two polarities, and you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And so I think with a director as accomplished as Scorsese, at this point, it's just like he's going to pick a note and sit on it, and if it's right or wrong, he's just going to like lean into that. And so I think that you could read it in a cynical way if you want to, but I don't know. It reminds us, and I think that it's a good reminder to have at the end.
It's something, speaking of Age of Innocence, that I loved the way that this movie ended. Partially because, it's a radio story and I work in radio, and there's something true about the way that you digest and exploit to tell a story using the quote real voices or the real experiences of other people. There's something inherently kind of grotesque about it that they really highlight. I also think that, thinking why I said Age of Innocence is like Scorsese puts himself, like many directors, in all of his films. And what I think of his role in Age of Innocence, he literally is framed as the person who's taking the wedding portrait of the two main characters. And he's, so there's still this awareness of like, I am the photo taker. I am I'm capturing this moment in history and this specific relationship and this specific dynamic. And there's something so self-implicating about him going on stage and reciting a monologue in which her obituary is read so blankly, and the harsh truth of her life is laid out so clearly in his voice that it kind of reminds you all the licenses he took throughout the entire film are because of who he is and not because of anything else. He is Scorsese. That's why he gets 3.5 hours to tell this film. And on top of that, part of why we're like shockingly so into this movie 3.5 hours in is he harnessed the power of a Western film. And that is the tension of the West and all of this iconography that is exploitative and dangerous to people, but fundamentally a part of the American myth that we love to consume. I'm from Arizona. I loved it. I loved one of my favorite moments in the film was specifically when Lily Gladstone gives him the cowboy hat to wear before she enters the house, which is so like giving a man the masculinity he needs to show up to your mother in a way that doesn't make you feel ashamed, and how like small his shoulders are and how like he isn't able to fill the promise of that hat. As a girl from Arizona, like that is so real. Some men cannot wear cowboy hats. They cannot. They look like the little boy that they are. And I just think that, that was such a cool moment in the movie, but also fundamentally something that Scorsese got to use as if he were a genius. As if he were a genius, versus like the idea that this is maybe a really powerful story of someone else's. It gave him a little bit of claim to it.
Okay, I'm going to throw it right back to you, and then we're going to go to Nate so he can throw up on all of our heads and our happiness. You said that you saved Barbie to watch with your sisters, which I'm assuming you saw it after everybody had already made their comments about it. What was that like, and did it live up to all of the hype?
It lived up to a lot of the hype. It was twofold. It was seeing it with my sisters. I'm also a graduate of Barnard, and I'll tell you now, if you went to Barnard College, the women's college in New York City, where Greta Gerwig went, they peddled it like it was a fucking Barnard movie. They were like, we did this. And anyone who's gone to Barnard did this. And it's the biggest thing to ever happen to American media. And so I went in kind of double loaded, where it was like, oh, wow, this is a lot of people I care about have a lot on the line here. And so I went into the movie defensively. I went into it knowing I really care about her as a filmmaker. It's dangerous to have that much of a budget and that much of a reputation. There were certain moments that really landed for me, certain moments that didn't. I was definitely one of those people who was guilty of like rewatching the Architectural Digest video over and over again about the way Greta and Margot conceived of the Barbie house, because it was such a perfect encapsulation of like my childhood play. Like I used to make Barbie toilets and dance studios out of like found objects, because it just the theater of Barbie was probably the first place where I was role-playing any kind of thing ever. And so it was such a momentous thing to take on as a filmmaker, and kind of impossible, because you have to be the spokesperson for Mattel. She's hired by Mattel in these studios to tell a female story of empowerment about Barbie. And I do think that there were a lot of qualms I had with it, and a lot of moments that fell flat for me, including the monologue. But I do think that the thing that Greta told Margot and everyone else on the set, or what apparently Greta and Margot told everyone was, drive this thing like you stole it. And I think that remembering that there is something inherently subversive about anything being said with this movie makes me a little bit kinder to it than I would be if I were just taking it as if it were produced like she was Scorsese, when it wasn't. She's a woman.
I've heard a lot of shit talking on this movie that it didn't say more. Like, it should have solved more, but it's a huge budget movie based on a toy. The fact that, like Kate said, it said anything. Nate, is your major issue not enough Michael Cera?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We needed way more
Alan?
Michael Cera. No. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
No. My issue is it's sort of similar to the Killers of the Flower Moon issue, and Kate hit on it. It's ultimately a corporate movie, and it's ultimately like a branding exercise in retconning what Barbie means for a new audience of people. And it says some good, important things in the meantime, but in a lot of ways it ends up being a little bit like Fruit Loops are part of this complete breakfast, where it's like, you should eat all of these things, but buy Fruit
30
Loops.
other things.
Yeah. You also need orange juice and eggs and bacon and pancakes and all this other stuff, but we have one kernel of truth to offer you. And yeah, I think it was well done. I enjoyed it. It's probably a movie that I will watch more than several of the other movies on the bracket. Like, I'll return to it for fun. And I think there's great performances. I mean, both movies have wonderful performances. It's just sort of similarly, like, I feel like I can make a better argument that Greta Gerwig's hands were tied by Mattel than I can make an argument that Scorsese's hands were tied by anything. So I understand why Greta couldn't make a more overtly, like, feminist boundary pushing movie that isn't sort of a classist movie that fails in sort of being like, oh, well, we're just gonna subclass men and that's the solution to patriarchy, which, I mean, the ideal is that there's no subclass. I think there's no archy.
Mikey, does this seem too harsh to you?
Yeah, I guess my question is, would it have been a better movie if it didn't try to tackle anything real at all? Then, to you, Nate, like,
no, I mean,
it was just because one of the things I thought this did so well is it reminded me movies are allowed to be funny, like movies in theaters. Did you guys know movies can be comedies? I didn't remember that was a thing.
You maybe didn't remember that good movies or movies that you liked watching could be comedies.
Yeah, I didn't know those things. But, like, I guess, because I hear what you're saying, Nate. It's like, I mean, her hands were tied, so it couldn't be this. But I guess in the reality where her, like, I guess I'm closer to Kate, where it's like, it's mind-boggling that she got as much subversiveness in this billion-dollar bright pink popcorn movie at all. And so, and I'm not trying to be a dick, but, like, would it have been a better movie-going experience for you if there was no message?
And
if it was just a goofy toy?
Like, my experience will always be, like, sort of colored by the fact that I took my 17-year-old and 10-year-old nephews, and listening to them talk after that movie was, the movie did it all times a million based on their conversations, you know?
Wait, tell us more. That's so interesting.
I mean, it started off with the 10-year-old being like, do we really treat girls like that? And then, like, they were just in the back seat talking about all of the times where they were pissed at me, because when I take them to the movies, they want to see Venom 3 or some fucking bullshit. But I insisted that we go on this, so we left my 2-year-old at home for a Barbie movie so I could take my teenage and preteen nephews. And yeah, they recorded or didn't record a podcast on the entire drive home about all of the ways that, like, boys don't think about girls, you know, and like how boys just assume certain facts without looking into it. It was, I mean, how am I not supposed to love this movie?
Yeah, no, and to Ryan's point there, like, I think that's the value in the film, like, and that's great. I guess in both of these cases, for both of these movies, some of my issue is I'm growing individually wary of the fact that, like, we keep having the same conversations that we were having in the 90s, and we're still broaching the same subjects, and we're not actually moving the ball. And so when a Barbie movie comes out where I'm like, oh, this is very similar to jokes that were in season 4 of Friends, and somehow we're still doing the same thing, and it's been 30 years, That's
But we're
bummer.
making a lot of money off it, Nate.
Sure.
Yeah, we're creating a lot. We're creating a lot of shareholder value.
Shareholder value, yeah,
Shareholder
yeah,
value,
absolutely.
yeah, it's just up and up.
I do think that something that is very, for all of the I think flexibility and like lenience I kind of gave to the film, some things that even going back to like, oh, the moments where it could really be funny to me were the moments where Greta as a writer and as a personality really shone through. I was crying laughing with my sisters at that little like kind of it was kind of like a wedge or like interstitial where it was the advertisement for for depressed Barbie. And it was like doom scroll your ex best friend's Instagram profile for an hour because she was newly engaged while eating an entire family size thing of Starburst until your jaw is sore. And it just felt like, oh yeah, absolutely, this is a woman making jokes about a very female experience. At the same time,
And get it or don't. Like that's what
yeah,
the movie
exactly.
said.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that was a moment where it's like it wasn't for everyone. It was for people who had that experience, and for those people, which include me, my sisters, my mother, we were crying laughing. However, so much of the movie, I could not help but feel deep in my bones how obvious it is that Greta Gerwig wrote it with her husband. Also, just again, I went to Barnard. My thesis advisor happened to be Greta's thesis advisor, like whenever it was. And what she told me was that Greta, while she was in college, was like, oh, the filmmaker I love is Noah Baumbach. And the film I'm going to digest for my thesis is The Squid and the Whale. And then we have everything that went down with her being an indie darling that was cast in one of his movies, and then he leaves a pregnant wife for Greta, and they have this whole life. Love it. Good for you. Girl bossed your way to the moment you're in. But can I ignore the fact, knowing what I know, that you approach this project as a married woman with the voice that you emulated since you were a child? No. And it's very obvious when even you see them in a joint interview about the script, their curiosity fundamentally is with Ken's condition. The thing that captured their imagination was, what is it to be Ken in a Barbie's world? Which is the more interesting question, as we saw. Ryan Gosling was the funniest part of the movie. All of the most like cinematic moments in the film, like when she's doing the 1950s Gene Kelly musical situation, those are the I'm just Ken moments. And so that makes it very hard to leave that movie feeling anything other than it's way cooler and funnier to be a man. And that's hard.
All right, everybody settle down. The audience is standing up and cheering right now at the studio. But yeah, I do think that there is this a little bit of, in the movie, the vanilla main character syndrome, where the Jerry Seinfeld syndrome, where we give Ken the jokes and America Ferrara the message, and then trust Margot
and then
Robbie.
Barbie's pretty.
Yeah. And like, I would have nominated her for Best Actress just on her falling to the ground, being sad, like right there. That's so hard to do. We are out of time so hard. Greg, I'm going to go to you first. Killers of the Flower Moon is your number 1 seed. Barbie is number 9. What are we thinking?
Okay. It's not easy. It's not easy, but I'm going to go Killers of the Flower Moon.
All right. Kate?
Barbie.
Did you make that decision right now?
Right now, that was a snap.
I saw it.
Yeah, you saw me making it. Yeah.
Mike?
I don't know if it was right, but it's a choice.
I don't want to go next. It ultimately now everything we've been talking about is like, well, if I go this way, is it because I'm patriarchal? But if I don't, it's Killers of the Flower Moon.
Nate? Oh, guys. Thank you for this gift of just saying that I appreciate Indigenous people more than Kate and Nate. So I am going to go with Killers of the Flower Moon, the number 1 seed. I think that ultimately Barbie is one of the movies that sort of stood out to me of these 8, where like I'm so happy that it happened, but I don't know how much it should be here now. I don't, yeah, and like it is hard to say. I've listened to a podcast where this woman said that she just said that she loved the movie Promising Young Woman for like 3 years until it was okay for a girl to say that she actually hated that movie, and then she came out with it. I do sort of think that Barbie is a step down below all of these people. I didn't even have to say that. I could have just said Killers of the Flower Moon and moved on, but I'm a fucking idiot. So Killers of the Flower Moon moves on. When we come back, the next battle. Your second battle is the number 2 seed Oppenheimer versus the number 4 seed May December. Coming out just 3 years after everyone watched Tenet and, with a straight face, tried to say, I understood that movie and enjoyed it, Christopher Nolan brings us Oppenheimer, a movie that he's been dying to make ever since the Tenet after party, when Robert Pattinson handed him a copy of the Oppenheimer biopic, or biobook, and said, "Here." Oppenheimer tells the story of the Wikipedia page of Robert Oppenheimer, the guy who was like, should I invent the bomb? Fine, I'll do it. God,
I'm gonna do
I
it.
didn't even want to make it, but you told me to. At some point, Einstein is like, told you, bro, beef you later, before he slides away on his hoverboard. This movie crazy. It's going up against May December, directed by Todd Haynes. A different sort of biopic, it is quote-unquote inspired by the story of Mary Kay Letourneau and the boy she raped, who we all used to be envious of until we thought about how absolutely awful the situation was. We had all forgot about until Captain Haynes made this movie. Thanks, Todd. Julianne Moore plays Gracie, and Riverdale alum Charles Melton plays Joe, her young beau who isn't young anymore. Everything seems to be going incredibly fine and unproblematic until B-list celebrity Elizabeth Berry, played by Natalie Portman, comes to town to shadow Gracie, because Elizabeth is going to play her in a movie soon. It turns out that Elizabeth and Gracie and Joe and Robert and Lewis, played by Robert Downey Jr., and Kitty, played by Emily Blunt, are all a little bit fucked up, and we get to watch it play out. Taste Mike, I ask you this. Which character or characters did you feel like you really understood thanks to the storytelling of these quote-unquote biopics?
Oh, which character? So we're saying what director and writers can capture humanity? It's not fucking Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, Ryan. Though I did like it way more than I expected. But no, we know Julianne Moore is phenomenal, and Natalie Portman slams everything. But young baby Riverdale actually being able to kind of hang the three of these leads, any combination, too, because they had so many two-handers, was riveting, and they all captured this weird fucking tone so well. This movie is weird, and tonally it's all over the place, and the biggest laugh lines are the over-the-top made-for-TV movie orchestral hits. And yeah,
the soundtrack is over the top.
It's over the top and delightful, and the people are not that over the top most of the time. But I think at the end, being like, oh, all we have is exploitation, and this guy it's another dummy. We're gonna exploit the shit out of him. That's what these two women are doing. And I think that's what the end of it doing. I railed off of what your actual question was, but the characters I understand, May, December.
Whatever I ask at the end of my intro is fucking whatever. Let's get into though the Lifetime movie of it all. That he decided to make a movie about this subject, and that he did it with two of our greatest actors, and then Charles Melton, and then have this tone. A lot of this tone has pushed people away. Did it make you
really?
Oh, yeah. Like, they see this, and, like, they just don't understand what they're watching. Did this tone push you guys away, or did you think it pushed the movie into risky greatness?
I thought it was perfect. I thought that, there is this deep weirdness at the center of everything going on in this movie, and the tone really brings that forward. And that's because they've created a life around an awful sin and crime, and then just double down over and over and over again. And there is just this incredible pressure that everybody is trying so hard to ignore what's going on. So many of the movies from 23, I feel like, are about people using, like, the amount of mental energy we use to obscure the truth from ourselves, and the way in which it exhausts us to just not face reality. And that's what they're doing here. They're going to continue to not face reality 20 years later. And Mike, you said I think you said that he's not a kid anymore. He's an adult now. But he's kind of not,
Oh,
right? Like
No. Yeah.
everybody is frozen in the moment that they
Arrested
the
Development,
moment that
yeah.
they did this, like their realities kind of froze and ossified forever.
The most heartbreaking moment is him and his son sitting on the roof, and
Yes.
he's
Yeah.
gonna share a joint with him, and he's like, "I've never done this," and he's like, "You've never smoked weed, Dad?" And this like everything is encapsulated
Dad.
in that joint, right? I mean, other than there's also the obvious like mother-wife way that Julianne Moore talks to him every time she asks him to do anything, where you're just like, "Oh yeah, that we feel those layers." But I think since it's a movie all about exploitation and we're exploiting the medium of film is the tone, right? Like we're taking it that next level up to be like, not only is this about exploitation, but we're going to exploit the viewer into the way that they experience this.
I want to give the movie props too for having the single most realistic, as far as my experience goes, weed smoking scene. Like he didn't smoke weed, and it wasn't like dogs started talking or he started to hallucinate that he was flying. It just crushing pressure of your stupid ass life. Kate, do you see comparisons between Willie Burkhart and Gracie? Like based on what Greg said of like, let's just keep this lie going and then we never have to think about how criminal we are? Or is that too broad of a comparison?
No, I think that there is I think there's truth to that. It's very hard in a conversation about May December to kind of have any conversation other than about that film in particular. It's a very individual movie.
Yeah.
You know, like it really isn't something I've seen done in any other way. That narrative about exploitation told from that perspective and in an aesthetic that is so easily derided and like makes you incredibly aware of your voyeurism. I'm what I find myself in this moment trapped in a way that I haven't been since I watched that movie is thinking about that movie, which is the only reason why I think it's even in the space it's in to contend. You know, like May December is in every way like the lesser movie. It had a smaller budget. It was a more feminine story. Like if we're thinking about award season type of stuff. But here I am listening to your introduction and I'm thinking about the way I felt when I watched Natalie Portman re-traumatize that man when she's like, I'm starting to get what was so exciting about this. Oh my God. That was the most like toe curling moment in the film for me.
And
where he had to relive the experience of being a stupid little boy for the jollies of
10 seconds
of a more knowing woman.
Yeah, and then like if we get to the ending, that's the thing that like absolutely blew me away because Gracie is a villain, right? Gracie, I don't know if we want to like talk about like how she's fucked up mentally, but like she did bad stuff and she continues to do bad stuff and she continues to lie to herself and her family. But then Natalie Portman comes in and just puts the spoon in the stew and stirs it all up. And then the final scene where we get to see the filming of the movie is like, for what? For this? Like, this is why you did this?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
I love that partway through we see the lesser version of this has already been made. Somebody ran out in a low budget, made the TV movie.
And it's hard to imagine that there is a lesser version than the version we see.
Exactly. And then she's like, no, I'm going to make the real one. And then we see it. We're like, oh, this is equal or worse than the clip we saw you watching.
At least the movie May December is good.
Watching these two, I would say top 10 actors that are working today, bounce off each other and their characters saying, you will not judge me, I will judge you. And just constantly trying to do that. And then at the end, you know, for like the whole reason is this, like you're not Natalie Portman, you did not technically rape a child, but are you better? Like look at what you've done and what is your reasoning for all this?
No, she exploited a whole town.
Oh, you're completely right. Exploiting the whole town for one. And I was going to say, I think that it's implied fairly well that she's kind of on the road to repeat the thing. Like she's embodied this character to the extent that she wants to do that scene until it's real. Because that's her last thing. It's finally starting to get real, right? and it's for her. It's not for the movie. She's doing a thing because this is on her bucket list, and it's creepy.
And we watched for the first hour and 50 minutes before we see the movie of her just using people like meat. Like, they are two-dimensional characters in her life, including the Penguin from Gotham.
Riddler.
Oh, the Riddler, excuse me, from Gotham.
Georgie, who's bringing such weird, as my wife pointed out, late 90s, early 2000s vibes to a movie that takes place way later than then.
Your energy is in the wrong era, my dude.
But I loved him. He was abrasive and cut through the horse shit. I could see if somebody watched it and hated this character, I'm in love with him.
Ryan, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you think it's interesting that in this segment so far, we've just naturally, the panelists have just like almost only spoken about May, December?
No. I'm gonna let Mike roast in a second, but I just want to make sure that we talk about May, December, because the crazy thing about this pairing, and this was not on purpose, is that one of these movies has been forgotten by the world in 2023, and the other one has been elevated to the greatest thing of all time. And I wonder, at least with award stuff, was May, December too attacky on storytelling, awards movies, and actors and filmmaking? Like, were there like people
Absolutely,
who watched this
yes.
and they were like, "Fuck, they're insulting me right now"?
Do you get if you make your movie about Hollywood, you get like +10 to awards, and if you make it about how Hollywood is too much of a shit show and too cheap, like, you get a little bit of that because then it's like Altman-esque, like, tongue in cheek, we're the worst. But if it's just out and out, we're like exploiters and schlockmeisters, then I think the establishment's like, nah, you're not gonna do well with a movie like that.
One of my favorite movies of the year, and it was just totally snubbed. I know where Mike and Greg stand. So Kate and Nate, before we get into it, where are you generally in with Christopher Nolan's career? Is he one of your faves? Do you make sure that you watch all the movies? Do you hate him? Where are you at? Kate, we'll go to you first.
I'm not a big Nolan fan. I like the idea of an epic, but I think especially this conversation within the context of 70 millimeter is particularly interesting, because it was definitely advertised as if it was a big experience, and I don't think that he as a filmmaker is actually up to the task of filling a screen with enough to look at. And I don't think that this is a movie that's any different than his previous films in that regard. I think that it's a narrative that's inherently interesting, as anyone, but especially I think a white American in 2023, to think about Oppenheimer's legacy in our culture and the way that the atomic age has fundamentally changed the way we think about everything.
So he took a topic that was inherently interesting and then just sort of coasted on it the entire time?
Yeah, I think so.
Nate, where are you at with that?
I don't disagree. I mean, I see Christopher Nolan movies when they come out, but I've been less and less impressed over time. I think the bloom is off the rose at this point with a lot of it. I think this movie in particular is riding so hard on incredible performances and to Kate's point, a topic that is inherently interesting. Like, what do we do to talk about the person who conceived of the ability to eradicate all life on Earth, and how does that person feel about that? And we sort of get that.
My answer to that question is more. You do more, and you don't like. And like he made what he made, and I'm not gonna say that he should have done this or this, but I actually am gonna say the Robert Downey Jr. plot line is like. It added this air of like what's going to happen because everybody knows that the bomb dropped, right? Everybody knows about the death, so we'll throw this in. And it honestly reminded me of the end of Pearl Harbor, where the movie Pearl Harbor couldn't end with a disaster, so they threw in some sort of quick U.S. Success just to make it the movie that they wanted. I didn't understand the choices, and like we're all going to be engaged for this movie, like the runtime of this movie, sort of, but like. The other movies on this bracket, we are engaged for hours and days and weeks and months after we come out of this movie. Oppenheimer's rise to the top of the year is a little bit baffling to me.
Here's what you do: you give it to a good director like John Glazer, and then the whole movie is in that little interrogation room.
Mm-hmm.
The whole fucking thing is in there, and then we learn so much more about these people, and we talk about it for years. Sorry, Greg, go.
I was going to say something about Pearl Harbor, and now I'm like, you know what? Let's not.
Did you guys watching this movie? Did you guys feel like that this was sort of the biopic in the style of Star Wars Episode 9, where it's just like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then we got to get here, and then we got to get here?
This movie did not need to be 3 hours long. The first 45 minutes cut it entirely because it was all scenes of like, and then I met this person, just so when they show up later and go, hey, Oppenheimer, we're friends. You go, I remember when they met. They are friends.
The Rami Malek role in this movie, that's insane. Like, Rami Malek's just there for a scene so he can come up later.
Chisel Jaw himself, we talked about. He grew up to be a man. Josh Hartnett, he could have showed up later and added a line of dialogue and be like, they were colleagues. Krumholtz, who I love in everything, didn't need his scene of meeting Oppenheimer. But in that first 45 minutes, so to me, the movie started like once Matt Damon showed up. Get the band together didn't work, but like we're there, we're building it. That's cool. But in the first 40 minutes, the thing I loved that felt so not Christopher Nolan and was all about collapsing time instead of expanding it in agonizing detail is in the interrogation room, Oppie feels vulnerable. Suddenly, Murphy is naked at this table. And I'm like, okay, Nolan doing something interesting with emotions maybe. And then later, similar trick, Emily Blunt, who plays Oppie's wife, finds out that he fucked Pew. So now in the middle of everybody else acting totally normal, Pew is just riding that dick in the middle of it. And I was like, I like this version of Nolan fucking with things because it's not like, look how smart I am. Do you guys see what I do with time? It's just using filmic tricks to show more about human emotion. And then he let me down. That stuff never happened again.
I think that's part of the problem.
Folks.
Who doesn't? I think it's part of the problem, though. The movie's tonally confused. Like, it is at times a propulsive, like, let's get the band together and do the thing. Like, there's an Ocean's 11 vibe to parts of this movie that is running counter to, like, hey, we've also got a Red Scare thing going on. Like, actual McCarthyism is happening. And instead of interrogating anything super specifically, it kind of cuts to, like, what if images of the universe and sounds happen every time that we don't know what to do, and then we'll cut back and forth? Or look at how beautiful New Mexico is, which, great. I mean, it is. It's a great looking movie, and it is, like, I don't know. It's maybe more fun than it has any right to be for what it is.
Yeah, Kate, I'm going to go to you with this question. The Matt Damon of it all. Matt Damon sort of comes in and saves the movie, steals the movie, or ruins the movie because he's like the biggest indicator of like we don't know what the tone is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that his character kind of upends the tone of Oppenheimer's research. So it's fair to have someone who's kind of feels like out of left field being the guy who's like, hey, we're in a new type of masculinity. We're in a new domain of power. We're in a new type of charm and charisma. And I'm particularly good at navigating this because I have the ability to do that. I think in theory, Matt Damon makes a lot of sense. Matt Damon's definitely one of those guys where it's like, I like him a lot. I don't know if he has, in my mind, successfully made the journey from like ingenue to man of the screen.
Not like Josh Hartnett.
Yeah, honestly, I know that sounds crazy, but Josh Hartnett hasn't been given the roles that Matt Damon has. Matt Damon has been given a lot of roles, and I think he has a boyish charm that he's been writing well into his middle age, and I think that it's very hard to me. It's kind of like Matt Damon as an actor is in conversation with like Jesse Plemons at this point.
I've always been a Damon fan, and like the conversation was always Damon Leo, and I always picked Damon, but I feel like he's gone from actor to celebrity. Like you sign him up for cameos, and he'll just Matt Damon his way out, and like that's sort of it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Are you referring to the Duncan commercial?
Yes.
Very Dunking's core, yeah.
But like, here's one of my problems with Oppenheimer is that I thought that he stood out, and I waited for him to come back. You know, like I was bored until he was there, and so I didn't really know what to do with the movie. One more question because it is Oscar season. Greg, I'll start with you. What did you think of the plot line and the performance of RDJ?
RDJ?
Sorry, Robert Downey Jr. You're not in the biz, so I have to like.
I guess I felt, honestly, Oppenheimer left me cold in a lot of ways, and I feel like it's because I could see the work, and I usually don't with Robert Downey Jr., and I'm happy for him that, like, this movie has been so well received and that his part has been in it. But for me, it left me just a little cold. That whole element of the movie it felt tacked on to the story and unnecessary, and I was just never super engaged with that part of it. It felt like just so that they could inject some conspiratorial element to it.
Yeah.
So it didn't really do a lot for me. I mean, I honestly, when I reflect on these two movies, I just think it says a lot that, like, when you bring them both up, people they have a lot to say about May, December. It feels like, you see Oppenheimer and it is big and you're like, oh yeah, definitely. And then it's not a book that you like open up again. You just kind of move on. And ultimately with these movies, they kind of live or die in the afterlife of like the next day or 2 days after you see them, and how bowled over you are by like the aftershock of everything and putting it all together and stuff. And with Oppenheimer, it didn't feel like that even existed. Like it just didn't make that much of an impression on me.
My fifth favorite person to talk to about movies after the four of you is my wife, and my wife actively booed the screen when we were in the theater. Just
During the movie or after?
During the movie. She was like, this is stupid. We had a couple before with dinner before the movie, but not a Nolan fan, not sort of tired of movies about white males who can do no wrong, even though they're constantly doing wrong, and she just started booing the theater.
I will say, as a Nolan not fan, I don't think this movie is saying none of these people did no wrong.
No, I don't think that either. They are dealing with it. I think that the best scene, if there was more around it, I do think the best scene is him talking to the people in the basketball arena or like giving that speech.
Oh yeah.
And then now we're finally doing something crazy with not just film but character, where like he can't stop thinking of all of the corpses he has caused. But I like, my favorite Nolan movie will always be Dunkirk, because it's not a story, it's just set pieces, and that's what he's good at.
Yeah, he just needs to not write. I think he's a good technical director, and just get at fucking anybody else to write.
His brother?
No.
Oh, okay, not his brother. All right, Mikey, it's up to you. May, December, or Oppenheimer?
Ken December, I think, is grammatically correct, and that's my vote.
Kate?
Oppenheimer.
Greg?
May, December.
Nate? And we have the gentleman sweep of May, December. Moving on. When we come back, two movies that start with the same letter. The next battle is your number 7 seed, Poor Things, versus your number 3 seed, Past Lives. There aren't two other movies in history that are this identical, but I'm going to try and separate them. Poor Things is Yorgos Lanthimos' follow-up to his Oscar-winning The Favorite, which reteams him with Emma Stone to tell the most fucking Yorgos version of Frankenstein possible. A mad scientist, played by Willem Dafoe, pulls Bella Baxter's, Emma Stone's, pregnant corpse out of the water post-suicide and replaces her dead brain with an infant's still-alive brain. From there, we go on an epic, rompy, coming-of-age tale where she meets Mark Ruffalo, fucks, goes on a boat, fucks, becomes a prostitute, fucks, and overall learns what it's like to fuck. It's going against Past Lives, the greatest pandemic movie of all time. A young girl is whisked away from the only country and only boy she's ever known and thrown into American culture. The young crush of the two children doesn't go away, and eventually they use social media and motherfucking Skype. Do you guys remember that? Remember that noise?
That such sense memory when that ringer came back on. Ugh, tremors.
Skype to reconnect and fall into something. Greta Lee, who plays Nora, and Tiao Yu, who plays Hae Sung, take us through a quiet journey of secrets, finding yourself, Americanization, and Skype politeness. In the meantime, first-time filmmaker but long-time playmaker Celine Song shows us how much you can do with a moment of silence, an awkward pause during a Zoom call, or a lingering camera on a husband doing his best not to be pissed. Taste Kate, we have two of the directors here that will be guiding the future of film for years to come. But let's focus on the very different performances of our leading ladies. Who hit you harder? The Asian actress Greta Lee or the person who played an Asian in the movie Aloha, Emma Stone?
Oof.
Especially Emma's a hometown hero. She's an Arizona girl, so I've always loved her.
How do you relate everything back to Arizona?
Very easily in the film industry. That's the thing, that the more I think about and talk about American film, the more it's relevant. But
It's Zona.
It's Zona, yeah.
The Zona of interest.
Exactly. So I think that the only movie I've watched twice of all 8 in this bracket is Past Lives.
Same.
So I do think that there is, I think my critic's eye is a little bit harsher on that film than others, perhaps. Because the first time I watched it, I was blown away by how brilliantly realistic the dialogue felt, how grown up everyone was, how beautiful and small and quiet that story was. And I think that those are all very true things. But when it's compared to something like Emma Stone in Poor Things, it's such a different, it's almost a different kind of acting. You know, like the verisimilitude that Greta Lee's bringing to that character, and the honesty, the adult honesty of her condition, right, is so brilliant, and it's so tender. But watching Emma Stone be a baby, a fucking baby brain, to be a new soul in a woman's body who has the instinct for adventure, moved me like no other film did this year. I left that cinema and immediately got myself like chicken wings at a bar, because I remember when I was a little kid, I would sometimes ask my mom to let me eat under the table if it was meat, so that way I could feel what it felt like to be a dog. And,
Great. This is
and
wonderful.
There was something, yeah, and so there was something deeply unlocked. Like, I was a little girl who loved adventure. I loved Robinson Crusoe. I loved the idea of the Swiss Family Robinson. The ingenuity of being given a fresh world for you to explore was something that captured me in a distinctly feminine way, but like a young person's way. And seeing that adventure take place in a female body, and explorations around sex as an adult woman being so, like, to me, it's so, like, she's beautiful and she's interesting, and so sex is sexy, but it's also like, I know what that's like to be discovering what it is to be a sexual object as a grown woman, and it is perplexing. And to see that for the first time on cinema, not just a moment where you're wanting Emma, but where you're understanding her and you're understanding the absurdity of adult life. It's hard. I was clearly enraptured by Poor Things, so that's where I'm landing.
The most common refrain from directors to their actors is do less, which I think that Greta Lee is crazy good at, but we are going to focus on Poor Things first. And it's not just, and also Oscars always go to the whatever field you're in, the person who did the most, right? Like the most sound, the most music, the most acting often. And watching Emma Stone in this movie, the bravery of, like, she had to feel like an idiot on the set. She had to be nervous, even though this is a director that she trusts and had worked with before. So scared. But, like, none of that is there. And also, and I don't know how important this is, but having lived the last 3 years with someone who turned 1 and 2 and 3, impeccable. Like, she is a better toddler than any toddler actually is in real life.
It's the belly first walk. She nailed that, where it's like, my center of gravity will be forward at all times.
This could have been so, like, a bad SNL skit too, right? Like Beck Bennett playing the baby man,
baby boss.
But it's not that. I mean, and granted, that's a funny bit, but this is earnest and real. I gotta, like, I'm with Kate on this. Like, this might be my favorite movie of 2023. Mainly because it actually centers a woman's experience in harnessing her own potential and not being dominated by any men, because all of the men are either too stupid or they are sort of sidelined. And that's great.
By her, who, instead of, like, growing up for decades under the thumb of the patriarchy, grows up very quickly and is like, I'm sorry, what did you tell me to do? No,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Nate, on the preview show, I asked you, you said that you were there when I predicted the winner of the 2023 Pop Filter bracket 6 months ago. Do you remember what movie that was?
Let's see.
I feel like I'm feeding you all the hints right now.
Yeah, I think
I think Past Lives. Is that what you predicted?
No, it was Poor Things.
No.
Greg, let's get to the story of you in the theater. How was it?
So I do not often go to the theater. I've been to the movie theater like 3 times in the past 5 years or something, but it was the only way I could see this movie before the podcast. So I went and I picked a seat all in the back all by myself. And then
Daytime
right
or nighttime?
Excuse me?
Daytime or nighttime?
Like afternoon. So I'm like, this is probably going to be an empty theater. It's probably just going to be just the old Gregster in here. But then right before it starts, this dude plops down right next to me. And I just, he was just so close. We were just so close to each other. And I'm not accustomed to being that close to a stranger. And it wouldn't be the first movie that I'd want to go see sitting right next to. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure how many of these movies, like, I guess Barbie, it would be fun. You were saying a lot of these movies are like fun to see with a bunch of people, but specifically some parts of Poor Things, it felt like, I don't know, it felt just so weird to be next to another person in the dark watching this.
Plus,
did you have the experience of where's the least creepy place for my hands? Is it wiping continuously on my knees? Is it over my lap? How does a normal person watch Emma Stone get railed?
Yeah, raising the
looking
roof.
like a
I think,
pervert.
is the best.
And
yeah,
even
it was
though
so comically non-erotic to me.
Yeah.
no,
Like,
it
I
was
mean, it was at
certainly-
moments, but it was just like, it was so not like she's Emma Stone having an amazing orgasm, it seems. So like that is an inherently titillating thing, but to be presented in such a way as like it's so obviously not about you looking at her,
Right.
was
Yeah.
so crazy to me. It was cool.
So much so
Yeah,
that
there's
do you think that Gen Z people will watch this and be okay with the sex on screen? Like, does the sex matter for the story enough where they will be okay, or is this all?
One thing that really hit home for me watching it was like, wow, it is crazy. It's so true. If you are raised in a like cis woman's body, your relationship to your own sexuality is so exactly the fight to autonomy. And it's like, I'd never seen it so clearly drawn before, but it's like, yeah, that is what the discomfort with like who I was becoming from the age I was 12 to the moment where I felt like I had power again when I was 25 was the journey I had with my own relationship with sex. So it's like, fuck, yeah. You should come, and it should make everyone in the theater uncomfortable. And it should be like a moment where you're like, well, how can I use this to become, like that moment where the bordello mistress is like, oh, a woman plotting her own escape. How marvelous. Like that's exactly what it is. You figuring out your own relationship to sex.
This was the first time I've ever seen a woman orgasm, so it was
Yeah, exactly.
crazy
Yeah,
to me.
I bet it was big. Yeah,
But,
it's
yeah.
cool, isn't it?
I guess. But like so many of these movies do, especially period pieces, do what Mark Ruffalo tries to do to her, which is just to
Yes.
like, you're wrong on all counts, particularly prostitution. Prostitutes are like the worst thing you could be. Like, how crazy is that? And she's like, I don't know, fucking, it was cool. Got off, made some money, whatever. And then she goes and gets some like sweetbread.
Yeah.
His character of like, yes, we should be free, and he loves her delight in things until he figures out that like, because he's like, yeah, society shouldn't control us, but I still want to control you because you're a woman and I'm a man. Let's not fuck with all the rules. And when he learns that she can't, yeah, it was beautiful. And then him having, it feels like, I know he's been in other stuff that's not Marvel, but seems like he is having so much fun not being in a fucking flat Marvel movie and being able to actually act his ass off.
Do you guys ever get
Truly,
sad about Kate?
Truly, Mark Ruffalo is a socialist, and you can really see that in this film. You can see that he is more liberal than other people in Hollywood. And one thing that was really so kind of cool to watch was just kind of the reality that this is a person who is exploring everything brand new, and how ridiculously dangerous that feels. And seeing specifically an auteur make a female actor feel safe enough to be avant-garde and brilliant, and it not be a Von Trier situation where
Right.
you're abusing them, that is to me the takeaway from this film.
Or a blue is the warmest color situation.
Yeah.
Watching Ruffalo go from I'm in love, unbeknownst to the character, I'm in love with a woman with a 3-year-old's brain. And as she gets older and more knowledgeable, so much more frustrating. Like, I hate this shit. I'm going to throw my donut on the ground because this is terrible. Do you guys ever get, like, we talked about when Chloe Zhao made The Eternals, like, this sucks. I kind of want Chloe Zhao to go make Chloe Zhao movies, but it's the same thing for actors, too. As big of a Marvel fan as I am, like, we lost 20 years of Mark Ruffalo performances, and watching this movie kind of made me bummed about that.
Yeah, for sure. And we've been doing his hair flip pouty face all week through this household since we've watched it. It's the best reaction to everything.
Can you demonstrate it for us, and I'll describe it for the listeners?
It looks like that thing Mark Ruffalo does.
Yeah, it is there.
It's in Poor Things.
Let's also, if we're going to talk about disgusting people, Nate, I'll go to you because he reminds me of you the most. Christopher Abbott from Girls comes in at the end and out Mark Ruffalo's Ruffalo. What do we think about this guy?
I think it's the best like button to put on this movie because he's so disgustingly horrible and serves not as an antagonist but as a final sort of declarative moment for Bella to say, "Oh, I'm going to find out what my past was and I'm also going to fully reject it." And we get it rejected in the most beautifully Yorgos way possible. And I love Goat Boy. It's great. You guys remember Goat Boy? Remember the 80s?
Should they have hired Jim Brewer to be that guy at the end?
Yes.
It's Bella at the table when Christopher Abbott, her husband from like the original person she was before she committed suicide, bringing in servants who he has to carry a pistol with him because of how much the servants hate him. Brings in a servant carrying soup or punch or something, and he's going to trip them and invent pranking. But it's not Bella saying, "Christopher Abbott, you're bad." It's the moment where she says, "Oh, I used to be bad." You know, it's like it still puts her in the foreground and saying, like, "I'm changed, I'm different. I don't even give a fuck about you." She's going to get
her
revenge.
understanding is just, "Oh, I get the mystery of why I killed myself. Great, I'm done. I've solved the mystery for me. You are not interesting." It's just so good. It's such a good meal.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that really hit me was the moment when she realizes that she is both mother and child. Mm-hmm. That made me cry in theaters, where just that moment where I think anyone and everyone should remember that, like, you are both someone who was pre-written and who is writing themselves, and both are true at the same time. And you should honor that past that you no longer have to live, but also understand why that led to where you are today. Was just, I thought that was a beautifully feminine way of acknowledging that you hold both past and present in yourself always.
I've heard some people complain about the final Willem Dafoe scene where she comes back for his death, but because she's like too forgiving about the monstrous stuff he's done. But like, I think, Kate, you nailed it. Of like, she is all of these things all at the same time, and like, I have to fill all of these roles, and you are, a psychopath who burps in a way that I wish I had at my home right now. But like, I am mother, daughter, and even almost like Willem Dafoe's mother at this point. Like, when your parents get too old that they're about to die, like, she's taken that role as well.
Totally. She's understood his trauma. Mm-hmm. She's digested it in a way that's like practicable for her, because I thought that was brilliant because he looks so Frankenstein-esque, and for us to have a very real world understanding of what that character is, that he was traumatized by his past and that informed the way he raised her or made her. And, to me, there was a lot of generational knowledge in that metaphor.
And to the film's credit, it doesn't lean heavily on him with, like, preventing her from going. Like, he holds her up for, like, the first 25, 30 minutes of the movie, maybe. But then he sort of goes, like, yeah, you know what, she was going to get out of here at some point. It's bold to not, like, it doesn't take any of the easy exits off the highway to create conflict. It's just like, no, let her go do her thing. Yeah. And cool shit's going to happen. Yeah.
And then real quick, stand-up comedians who want to be actors, I will say watch this movie because Rami Youssef is absolutely incredible in this movie. Jerry Carmichael should stick to stand-up. Holy moly.
No, I loved him.
In this movie?
Yeah.
They had to do, like, at some point, don't you have to go like, okay, wait, pause. We got to figure this out. Like, this can't just be in the final cut of the movie.
I felt like there's a lot of characters who weren't like our main few that were all spouting life philosophies at a certain point, and so I thought he captured that fine.
I thought
mean,
he was.
The settings were kind of like 2-dimensional and fantastic, and so maybe some of the performances were intentionally kind of like wooden and overly performative.
I would compare his performance to a lazy, uncaring host of SNL this week. Just where are the cue cards? I don't care. Greg, Poor Things, the earliest release of all of 8 of our movies. Did it still stick with you? You and Kate said that you watched it again.
You said
You
Poor
meant
Things,
Past
but you
Lives.
mean
I'm so
Past
sorry.
Lives.
Past lives.
Yeah. Yes, I did, because I watched it, and then I wanted to watch it with my wife, and then I did watch it with my wife. And Kate, when you were talking about it, it seemed like you were winding up to say something that I am now going to jump in, and I wonder if you had the same idea, which is that it is a beautiful movie, really, really beautiful, and there are a lot of like simple, quiet moments that are very profound. But there are, I think, a couple of scenes where the dialogue gets very like Playhouse, very like just suddenly you're like, whoa, yeah, this is dialogue. Like, they are now having dialogue back and forth, and it is such a jarring experience. And it happened in a couple different times where it pushed me out of the movie, and it didn't ruin my like appreciation for the movie, but I just did feel like that was a misstep a couple different times where just scenes sort of fell apart in the dialogue.
Is that what you were thinking, Kate?
Yeah, I think that it's very written in a way that's lovely,
Yeah.
but would I say it's the best film of the year? And it's funny because it's in conversation right now with Yorgos's film. And often Yorgos, I mean, to me, like even The Favorite, there was a lot that I loved about it, but he makes himself so present as a director that at least in the last narrative that I saw, it felt chauvinist. It felt like you are focusing on 3 women, so you feel the need to use a fisheye lens to remind us that you're here telling the story. And I think it's probably the setting of this piece, maybe Emma. There's something steampunk about it. Of retro-futurist about it that lets you kind of hold in your hands the truth of the narrative with all of his kind of machinations and like believe it. So I think that he was more successful in this film.
Is that like, does it make it more fabulistic than The Favorite? Like, we're opening up a, not children's book, but a fantasy book. And because of how so the fisheyes don't come up across, like The Favorite seems like this could have happened back then. Poor Things never makes that claim.
When she
It feels
travels
very
abroad,
romantic.
the sets are very conspicuously like, here is a set, and we're going to stage all our scenes in this little roundabout, and then off in the distance is like a highly painted like series of 3 different layers of fake background, and it's so noticeable. But honestly, it gives it that like adventure book feeling. You know, she's going out into this new wide magical world. And when you understand that it's a little bit more magical than you may have thought at this point, it gives you that like burst of excitement.
Mike, I'm going to go to you for this one. I get what they're saying about the writerliness, and Celine Song is a former playwright who, and you know, that's a tough
reforming.
And maybe she'll do plays again. But I understand that there are those dialogue heavy moments, but with Past Lives, I can only remember the bottom lip quivering scenes, and those scenes go out of my head, as opposed to Poor Things, where oftentimes I'm remembering the fact that they go to Alexandria for the most obvious bullshit ever. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, which of the movies like overly said scenes bothers you the most?
Yeah, I don't. So wrapping my head around Past Lives, it's I love the before films. And I know you do even more. I learned them from you. I learned them from watching you, Ryan. And this reminded me so much of the before, sunset, sunrise, etc. In a way of like, just watch these people fall in and out of love and have conversations that I get, Kate and Greg, what you're saying could bother you about it. But right now I'm as in love as these people are still. And it made those like the little things you're like, yeah, this person I love will do this, and that bugs me, but I don't care right now. I do fucking not care at all about any of the blemishes past lives have. It is.
I have to say,
phenomenal.
For most of these movies, though, that's what it is. It's the minor blemishes that separate
Yeah.
them from one another.
Right.
You have
So
to find
that's
something.
the only reason why I even bring it up.
Oh,
Like,
for sure.
But the thing with past lives, though, like with the before movies, the greatest trilogy of all time, they're falling in love. The thing that past lives does of how they're falling in something that is unspeakable, you know, like nostalgia and and respect and love. But is it like that? I can't think of another example of that because we always just go to love, and love is dumb.
And one of the most, I'd say, like writerly portions are when Cookie's in the corner of the bar, and it's the scene we start in, and then now we're there again. It's 4 a.m. Cookie's in the bar. Cookie from First Cow. Sorry, I'm just using phraseology for movie of the year. The husband is in the bar trying to not look pissed that his wife is flirting in front of him. He doesn't know, and they're saying all the things they could be to each other. That was very play-like, but also dancing around like we don't have the language for what we think we are to each other. I think is gorgeous, and
that
it
wasn't
feels
one
like
of
you
my
have
moments,
to heighten
though.
it.
I thought that was a
Okay.
very well written scene. Yeah, that wasn't. There's a scene with the husband and wife in bed where they are talking about it that I felt got very choppy.
But going back to what Kate said earlier about the adultness, particularly of Greta Lee, and I think that the husband, Bam Margera, Cookie from
Curly
it's
soft boy,
John Magaro, I think. Is
John Magaro.
curly soft boy Cookie, just a big sweetie.
There's a scene where Greta Lee is brushing her teeth, and they're just talking like married couples do, and she is so an incredible performance because she's dancing around the fact like, you're not jealous, are you? But also, I am sort of saying things that I can understand if you were jealous, but it'd be dumb if you were. But also, I'm being true, but also a little bit I'm making you jealous. And these are all in lines of dialogue that like don't say any of that stuff. It's just there, and it's like it was as new to me as watching Willem Dafoe burp a bubble. You know.
In that, because your original question is the glaring issues. The other one is Yorgos has become like my favorite filmmaker. I think he does things visually nobody else wants to anymore, and in love. And I went in knowing I would love it and loved it the whole time. And so yes, was the Alexandria thing, but we're also telling from her point of view a children's story, and I don't really care that part was a little hacky when the rest was so mind blowing and not hacky at all.
Yeah, I do think that, and this is fully just the experience of being a young white woman, but there is something incredibly authentic to like finding yourself on a boat and all of a sudden you're around all these ideas and new people who have different experiences than you, and kind of the like embarrassing simplicity of a person who doesn't have your life showing you that life hurts, and then you processing what that means and what your role in society is. Like, it was definitely a fable, but it didn't feel untrue.
No.
It was a moment where I kind of was like, oh wow, God, I remember being 19 and like in school, and that's basically what happens, right? Like, you leave your bubble and someone who has had to know more of the world kind of like says you're an idiot. Like, that's an essential part of growing up and becoming more sophisticated in thought, is a moment where you're reduced to kind of childlike, acknowledge the pain of others. So in some ways it kind of worked for me.
Is this movie just a remake of Billy Madison more than Frankenstein?
Yeah, in some ways.
Speaking of what Kate said, like the truth things, and there's so many little things and poor things, but like your piece of shit significant other gets pissed off that you're reading, so he throws the book over the boat, and then you have a friend that's so there for you. She just slightly puts another book in your hand for you to read. All right, Nate, we got to do this. One of these P titles has to go. Number 7, Poor Things, or number 3, Past Lives?
I'm voting for Poor Things.
Mike?
This is my least favorite battle. This is the one I didn't want to do. But I think Poor Things is going to edge it out for me.
That's 2 for Poor Things? Kate?
Yep.
Poor Things.
Holy shit. Greg?
Yeah, it feels close, but it feels definitive. Poor Things.
All right, Poor Things moves on. When we come back, the Sandra Huller of it all. The fifth seed, The Zone of Interest, is going up against Anatomy of a Fall. I know we wanted Barbie versus Oppenheimer, but what we did get is a Sandra Holler versus Sandra Holler. It's a Holler-Baloo. Blue is the warmest Holler. The Sandra Accord.
Sandra's
Holler
choice.
drank all the Pepsi. Hotel Rassandra. Hotel Rassandra. Your fifth seed is The Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer's first movie in 10 years. After 2013's Under the Skin, Glazer took a step back and said, what's worse than murderous aliens? The movie tells the story of the Haas family, a real-ass family in real-ass life, who built a mansion/compound literally next door to Auschwitz. The land was cheap, but all you have to do is deal with the constant sounds of genocide right next door. The director shot the movie almost as if it was a reality show, with hidden cameras showing us the insides of a family living off the death of others. Your number 6 seed is Anatomy of a Fall, Justine Trier's exploration of both marriage and the French legal system. Not about the dissection of a single season, as nobody probably initially thought, including me. The title instead refers to a husband and father's fall out of a window to his death, and yes, the title does refer to the movie Anatomy of a Murder, and not, again, to a season. Sandra Holler, who plays Sandra, is arrested and put under house arrest for potentially causing this fall. But did she do it? Is the movie concerned with this? Taste, Greg?
Hey-o.
I ask you this. Which of these two Hollers hit you the hardest? The one that maybe killed her husband, or the Nazi lover?
Wow. Jeez. I have to say the Anatomy of they're both her movie. It's hard to pick one over the other. The one that shook me up more though was Zone of Interest because I didn't see it coming. I thought it was going to be like as soon as I saw her I was like, "Oh, this poor woman, she's got to live in this place. It's probably because this guy is such a hardcore Nazi and she probably just like spends all her mental energy ignoring the fact that she lives next to a concentration camp." And it's like, "Okay, Greg, no. This lady's a freaking Nazi, man. She's also a Nazi."
She's like a Gabor in this movie.
Yeah.
Just like sunglasses and sunlight and like, my life.
She's like telling the husband, like, get me stuff. Like, it's not from the store. Like, and they've got all this like glamorous clothing. The way in which the Anatomy of a Fall character hit me is she has a mature view of marriage. Like how you are supposed to show up for one another and what you owe one another in a marriage. And I thought the scenes in which she describes what she did and did not owe her husband in her estimation, I thought were among the most interesting scenes of any of the movies that we saw this year. And I did not know she was in both movies, and so when I saw her in Zone of Interest, I got very excited. What else has she been in, Ryan? Is this like an actress that you know of from other things?
Just from one thing, the Kristen Wiig and Jack Nicholson European version of Tony Erdmann.
The original Tony Erdmann, right?
Remember that one where she's just dealing with her dad as a 40-year-old? I think that was her claim to fame. Although Europe has movies all the time. Who knows?
Dude, Europe's got movies.
All right, let's start with Zone of Interest. Kate, Mike brought up earlier Glazer and how he can just do movies better than Nolan. What was your experience like watching this movie? A movie that is difficult, if they impossible, to recommend.
I appreciate that. So my understanding of I think Zone of Interest was the most interesting to me in the first 5 minutes of seeing it in theaters, and then in the conversations I had with people about it afterwards. I think it's a very pretentious film, and I don't think that it's overall something that will stand out in history other than the first in a very long series of conversations about Nazism and what it was to be a German in Nazi Germany, told with any honesty. I think this is the first time probably since the propaganda machine back in the 30s where like German film was in a space to even talk about those things. So it was interesting, but at the same time, fundamentally, the one thing that I think that was really interesting about the conversation was like in the final shots, the reminder that the German experience in 2023 is a very custodial one when it comes to the Holocaust. It's very hard to know how to tell a story about it in any interesting way, because your job is to maintain the integrity of the horror on some level.
And yet you can see how it's not happening.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that held me in those first 5 minutes of the screening was the idea of, which I think I would have only gotten by seeing it in theaters, was looking at the title, Zone of Interest, kind of fade into darkness over the period of minutes.
Oh, when you say the first 5 minutes of the movie, that's all black.
The first 5 minutes.
Music.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all music. And there's something very powerful in terms of your eyes adjusting. You know, you spend time kind of becoming a part of the world and the vision that they want you to see. And I think
they're all choices.
Yeah.
They are all choices for sure. Nate, when I hear pretentious, and I'm not arguing with Kate, when I hear that word, I think boring. Is this movie boring? And if so, is it boring on purpose to like prove a point?
I think it's not boring, but I think everything that it's doing is trying to sort of thoughtfully subvert the way that we've addressed the Holocaust and Nazism in cinema for my lifetime, anything that I've seen and remember. Because instead of, we talked about that first 5 minutes, the movie is forefronting, like, we're not going to show you the atrocities. You've seen it. We're not going to do the thing where we dazzle you with how horrible and desiccated these people are and how abused they are. You're going to experience what it's like to be adjacent to an atrocity, which I think, at least for me, set me in a mindset of like, yeah, this makes every aspect of living in late-stage capitalism in the United States right? Like,
because you're not doing
shit is happening everywhere all the time, and I am sitting in a movie theater watching a movie and not listening to the horrible shit that's happening, but it's out there. People are screaming, people are being shot, people are running away, people are starving. I am not actively participating in it, but it is happening nonetheless.
You're either in a movie theater or you're saying like, and then over here are the pumpkins. You see it in my gardens, pumpkins.
I mean, the moment when he puts out the memo about how, look, if you're gonna pick the lavender, pick it courteously.
Yeah.
Like, don't make the plant bleed, which is such a
Nazi's got a Nazi.
I think it's like it's brilliant to say that. It's such a perfect, like, here is what bureaucracy is. It's the same way that like someone at Nestle is like, hey, make sure that we triplicate the contract that steals the water from this group of people, because we need to do our paperwork correctly.
I didn't steal the water. It's just my job to triplicate the thing. So
yeah,
I'm not
all I'm doing is
wrong.
that. I'm just the person who ensures that the TPS reports have the cover page, because we're doing that now.
Mike, you, as you're so wont to do, talk shit on Christopher Nolan. This is a movie where the director it's almost like he set up permanent cameras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he described it as Big Brother in the Nazi house. Big Brother, the reality show.
But like, it didn't feel like, all right, she walked out of the door, so let's all move the cameras to the outside. It's like they're always there, and yet this movie, it doesn't have that Christopher Nolan. Even Martin Scorsese over directing, and yet it is the most gorgeous movie that we saw this year. Like, what were you talking about when you talked about him as opposed to Nolan?
Well, yeah. Well, the trick is he doesn't need to remind you he exists. I think what Glazer, I'm not so well versed. I could be like, well, he has this trick that he clearly did it under the skin, and he did again here. What he does is, what's your genre? No, I get it. I'm gonna elevate that shit. More than anybody else can, and for doing this is also a biopic, and telling the story is, I think, going out of his way to only use natural lighting. Every little trick he does is like, this was real. I'm not dramatizing anything. He's never going to twirl his mustache. He's like, these are real people, because all he wants to do is hit us over the head with the mundanity and banality of evil. So he is worried about his boss and his wife yelling about two different things. And there are two little kids hidden around the corner just kissing and figuring out, but they're not worried about people screaming and dying across the wall. They're worried about daddy coming and seeing that they're learning how to smooch. It's all those little real things hidden around there. Again, highlights. And I didn't even think about it. So Nate said it is like, we're all fucking doing this all the time.
Yeah. At no point did you think, this jerk off is just jerking off.
No, not a single second.
Not
there
even
any point-
the scenes that are negatives. The girl with the apples.
Okay, yes, okay, those single
Yeah.
seconds.
I gotcha.
Is because I was like, it's so jarring and different, and I was like, negatives, and sometimes you stare at him so long and she looks so weird that I'm like, is this weird animation CGI? Like, it looks funky. And I read up a little. So Glazer met this woman. She was 90 when they met. She was that girl. She did this, and that's an awesome story. I wiped it out. I didn't even think about those because it feels like it does not belong in this movie. But he met this amazing woman who did this amazing thing. So he was like, well, I'm going to put that in there, and it didn't.
It's like the pirate stories from Watchmen. Like
It's the opposite. So
Yeah.
it's negative.
I wiped that out completely. Fuck yeah.
there's one point I couldn't tell if it was CGI because there's one point she's walking down the road and also a pig just walks down the road. That pig looked fake as hell. I don't know if that was real. All right. We now have to turn our attention to Anatomy of a Fall. Kate, I'm going to go with you here. Did this strike you as a movie where, like, I am thinking throughout it, did she or didn't she? Or should we just remove that question from the conversation?
I think what makes it a good movie is that you are not certain. You know, I do think that I was asking that question of myself the entire time. What makes it an excellent narrative on some level is the fact that it doesn't really matter either way. Like, to me, it's so interesting to follow her in her position navigating the system. The idea of, like, how do you create sympathy when even in your domestic life, you are not sympathetic? To me, it was so powerful to tell the story of a woman who just is more successful than her husband, and the fundamental sin of that. The sin of being more creative and more interesting and having a better voice for telling stories. You know, that is what do you do when you share stories? And the marriage contract is kind of I think to this day, the idea that, like, it is the man's story that you are marrying into. And on some level, any narrative you have to offer is as a mother of his child. And what if he fucks up your kid and is too impotent in his own life to tell his own story? What do you do if you were the more talented of the two? Like, that is such a controversial question because it's too painful of an answer for most domestic spaces to answer.
I thought that the mystery parts of this movie were paled in comparison to the marriage parts of this movie. That was what the most interesting. And do you guys think that Sandra, who plays Sandra, is a sociopath or, like, bad at emotions, or do you think that she is just a product of her environment, tired of raising two children, and now has to fake it to make it in order to not go to jail?
That one. The little we see of Vincent, he sucks. He is a trash dude who has I could write a script, it'd be good. If I write it down, it won't be good, so I'm just going to talk about how I could it, but I'm going to get real mad that you actually do things. I guess should have let everybody else answer. I related to Sandra a lot of, like, here's what I said I would do in the marriage. I don't think I've done anything wrong. Eat my dick. Like, her attitude of that, like, I'm all about.
No, her breach of contract, her crime is that she doesn't, like, embrace the sort of, like, oh, well, I'll become your mother if you're a fragile, broken man now.
Yeah.
She just rejects that premise, and that's it. Like, that's the whole point of their argument, that they play that long tape of them arguing, and it's like, yeah, he wants her to finally reach a point of, like, okay, I get it. You're hurt so much that it's my job to take care of you. And she's like, no, it's not my job to take care of you. We're supposed to do a thing together as adults.
Yes.
You have to either hurt as much as I hurt right now, or you have to make me not hurt. Those are your two options. And, like, that middle scene of their argument, which that's the one that's recorded, and then we watch it happen as the court is listening. French court, by the way. We should get to French court. And then we hear the end, but don't see it, where it is violent. And Sandra claims that she slapped him, and then the rest of the noises you hear are him slapping himself. But that scene, the dialogue in that scene, is, like, the most relatable dialogue I've heard since the movie The Worst Person in the World. Did you guys see that movie?
No.
Yes, yeah.
just this is how relationships work. And the number one thing, just like in the court case, the number one thing in marriages is like, they don't tell you this before you get married, but there are two realities. Like there are two things that happen, and they're arguing the same thing but different. And she nips it in the bud by saying the most true thing and the worst thing that guy could hear, which is like, I'm not going to pretend you're the victim.
Yeah.
And that makes him realize, but like, that's what I wanted to be.
Yeah. it illustrates a relationship where one person is taking, but the other person is giving and then resenting. I mean, that's what, like, he agrees to everything that happens in their life, but he agrees with resentment. And she doesn't have empathy towards that perspective, because it's like from her perspective, she is just stating what she wants and being willing to take it. And his acquiescing to that is an agreement that they've made. But then he also wants to like whinge about it. And frankly, I just think that like she feels like she's out of time for that. My question though is like, and I guess you were talking about getting to this, Ryan, but like, why did they don't really have great evidence against her? I felt like as part of the vibes-based like French legal system, it's just like everybody jumps up and is like, "Here's what I think might have gone down."
And anybody can, right? Like,
yeah,
you can just run in and be like, "Oh, French court, hello, this is me." But there's like two DNA CSI lawyers, and one's like, "Oh, she clearly pushed him," and the other one's like, "There's no way that she pushed him."
And I'm so skeptical. From now on, anytime America, but it's your buddy Greg here. Anytime if you're in a court setting and you're on the jury or something, and they're like, "We're going to bring in an expert to talk about," just keep in mind that whatever is said next, there's a good chance it's bullshit. And if we don't know it now, we'll know in 10 years why this like field of forensic pathology is like completely bullshit. Like bite analysis, fall analysis, splatter analysis. This is all hoodoo to just like stick charges on innocent people.
Yes.
So it's like even more offensive in this movie where they're just like, we're going to like look at the splatter and tell you what happened based on how some drops fell.
Or the jury's like, whoever has the last word.
There's an awesome book called The Cadaver King and Country Dentist that breaks down not only how that's all bunk, but how these people who do this professionally literally travel around the country and get paid for it
Professional
and
witnesses.
make shit up. And
they're privateers.
It's all horseshit.
It's like the new evangelical like touring church.
Yes.
At one point in the court case, they bring his therapist in.
Yeah.
And the therapist is like, he told me it was all your fault and not
Dude,
his.
You
at
should have
all.
heard the way this guy talked about you. He was angry with you.
I do want to talk about. Let me look up his name. He is not blind in real life, but Milo Machado Grainer,
Oh man,
who looks like a young French Skylar Gisondo, who's the guy from Righteous Gemstones and Booksmart. With this bowl haircut that always covers his ears perfectly.
Oh man, you're so right about that. He looks just like
Yeah. I would say, Kate, let me go to you. Better performance: Daniel, played by Milo Machado Grainer, or Snoop, the dog in this movie.
I mean, Snoop's notably good. I will say, for dog acting, I buy it. I really do. And I do think that, I don't know, it was such a cool, and I think going back to what we were talking about in terms of like movies about 2023, these are movies kind of about storytelling and about the truth of who is telling the story and what makes that real.
Perspectives.
I think one of the most intimidating truths to the patriarchy is that a son loves his mother more than he loves the patriarchy until time tells you to stop. And I think that the power of what's intimidating to the court is the reality that the emotional truth of the home life might be that mom should kill dad. And if that's the case, and we are relying entirely on the child's perspective, how are we supposed to admit justice through that lens? And it's very difficult, I think. And I loved the ambiguity up until the end in terms of that kid's role and his relationship to his own truth being so mutable. And in a what felt very human and real way, you land on the side of mom when you just see how people in pain act, and you use that to deduct truth about life. I think that's probably how everyone feels.
And this kid who eventually decides, mom, I don't know if he's telling the truth or if he's making decisions here, but like, this is a kid who does tell his handler, the court-appointed handler, I do not want my mom in the house this weekend. Also has to sit there while mom describes affairs. Like, you want to talk about like your parents falling from grace. Like, this is all going down right now. This is, in a lot of ways, even though Sandra Hüller is absolutely the performance of the year, as much as I love Lily Gladstone and Emma Stone, this is the Hüller show, I think. But I think this kid being constantly put in the center of this case is what the whole movie is about. And Snoop.
Yeah, the worst part of the movie is poisoning the dog.
Oh,
I lost my mind during
Yes.
that part because I was so invested, and so I was like, no, this is not okay. I can't do this, even though it's an experiment. I get what's happening. It's ingenious in a way.
so now I hate the
It was
blind kid.
heartbreaking.
Mike, you hate every blind kid.
It's a
Just
definite
see.
complication because it's like, okay, is this something that's in this family, a sort of cold-blooded, like,
Yeah, this
he's gonna do this
calculating sort of.
calculation. Yeah, and so then you come away being like, oh man, like, what is that? Why there's this mother-son alliance in the end because they're both the same kind of person, and what does that mean about her? And then why do you like? Then you have to ask yourself why you are judging her for the way her son is. And so I just think it's just one of these elements that the movie gives you that you, instead of settling anything, which you might hope to have, instead it's like, here's a box of 20 questions, and then each one of those questions, as you pursue the answer, it is each attached to a box just full of more questions.
There's a scene where the student who comes to interview Sandra in the first scene is in court, and she is pegged in court. Like, those lawyers do not, like, they get her to talk, and they ask the question, was she drunk? And just her answer to that question is so important. Like, she could be like, maybe, or she could be like, yes, or she could be like, fuck yes. And like, that changes everything in this story. It's how you tell the story. And Sandra, who is, I won't say a sociopath, but like, not the warmest, most feeling person, has to act there on stage because she's on stage the entire time.
It's so hard if you're not a warm, like, open person to stand
No,
accused
I know,
of
Greg.
a crime. Like, the legal system is not set up for unlikable people. It's like
It's not set up for unlikable women.
Yeah.
like it's not set up for a German woman dealing with a language barrier. And I thought that was one of the best parts of the film, is that it just like it centered the reality of like, I cannot communicate who I am effectively. And so it has to be through intermediaries, which means it has to be softened through archetype. And who is my archetype? I'm the cold German competitor who fucked you, who still fucks women.
And
so that's hard.
being a German is like a thing the whole movie. Like, well, you're German. Like, the husband keeps saying, like, you're different because you're German. But when she asks, can I speak English? You can feel the audience being like, well, I'm going to check off that on my clipboard. Like, she's obviously, that was too much to ask. But did she, okay, a couple more questions out of the 30 that we have. Did she fuck the lawyer? Her lawyer, who looks like a young, handsome Martin Short. Did
There
she
was
have
definitely an
affair with him
energy
earlier?
there.
No, he wanted to fuck her.
He wanted to fuck her.
He
I
wanted to
assumed
fuck
they
her
had
and
in
she
the
used
past.
it.
Like, they knew each other, so I assumed he was one of the beaux from back in the day. But that's me headcanon.
Yeah, I assumed they had never fucked, and that she called on him knowing he was sympathetic to her,
Because he wanted
but
to fuck
thinking
her.
she could potentially still manipulate the situation in which she's still not just a sex object, but someone who's able to have a voice.
And see, again, like, he is getting what he wants out of that relationship, even if, like, she's just summoning him because she knows he'll do this for her. He still get it. That's what the deal is. He gets to hang out around her as long as he's doing this job for her, and he's agreeing to do that.
Yeah, and like she's probably more real to him than anybody else in this movie. Much more real to him than her. Like, opens up to him. Okay, but once she is declared not guilty, instead of going straight home to see her son, who she goes out and says like, "Oh, let's have a drink and a big dinner."
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm not here to judge her. I'm here to judge movies, and let's do that right now. Nate, The Zone of Interest or Anatomy of a Fall?
I'm gonna go with Zone of Interest.
Greg?
We could just talk about the fact that she doesn't go home to her kid and how that makes us feel about her, and like how we should feel about that for like another hour on this show.
If she, instead of going home, she went to a podcast studio to podcast, that I get.
God, these are both so good, but I think I am so much more interested in thinking about and engaging with, and was so much more excited by on many levels, Anatomy of a Fall.
Kate?
I feel the same way. Anatomy.
Mikey?
I love John Glazer and want to see everything he does with everything. But yeah, the movie that I think has more... there was a certain point halfway through Zone of Interest that I was like, I get it. This probably could have been a short film.
That's enough.
It's Anatomy of a Fall. I cannot say... It was the first of all these that I've watched, and I cannot stop thinking about it.
You know what it reminds me of is After Sun? Mike, have you seen that?
Oh,
Never heard
goodness.
of it.
There's a lot of
the
similarities
boys
to
are
the movie
fighting.
After Sun.
Oh.
So I highly recommend the
familiar.
movie After Sun. We're going to take a break.
After Sun's the Love Island talk show. After Love Island plays, they interview people. Is that what you're talking about?
No, that's not
That
it.
is that is what I'm talking about. That my favorite movie that you just ignore because you ignore me is the after show for Love Island. When we come back, me, Nate, Greg, and Kate will decide on the final movie. No one knows where Mike will go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is down to this. We are about to determine the single greatest movie of 2023.
Woo!
Nate, I'm going to start with you. Your number 1 seed is Killers of the Flower Moon. Your number 4 seed, which means we went chalk, is May December. Where's your head at right now?
I'm gonna go. I like May December better. I think it's a better movie. I think it's a more challenging movie, and yeah, I said my piece.
Greg?
Yeah. Oof. Jeez. I think I enjoyed the space. They're both very uncomfortable movies, but I think I enjoyed the space of May December more. And I think I was more interested in what it had to say. So yeah, I'm gonna go May December.
Kate?
May December.
Holy shit.
Yeah, let's. I think it is. It's a more staying film.
May December, a movie that is not nominated for Best Picture and isn't even nominated or directed by Martin Scorsese, is in the finals. Mike, what would you have gone with?
I would have gone Killers.
Me too. Next year when we do the movie show, we need more boys. You know, like Scorsese's boys.
The boys.
Lock arms with the boys.
The big block-headed boys.
No. When I watch these movies, I sympathize with the girly and curly soft boys. Whether it's Poor Things or Past Lives, it's the curly soft boys for me.
Mike, back to you. Poor Things or Anatomy of a Fall?
I loved Anatomy of a Fall. To quote, I think one of the best film historians in recent years. It's a movie that feels like a movie again. Harry Styles is the person I'm quoting.
Sure.
But Poor Things, I think it's my favorite guy, and it's my favorite movie of the year. And fuck yeah.
Follow-up question, Mike. When you say or sing the word Lanthimos in your home, do you do it to the tune of Bailamos?
Can I hear like Lanthimos?
Yeah, you know it. You got it.
yeah. Now I do.
You know what? I do. Kate, Poor Things is your number 7 seed. Anatomy of Fall is 6.
That's so hard. I do think that Poor Things is the better film.
I'm getting fucked here. Greg?
Wow.
Talk us through it. What are you thinking right now?
I'm thinking that it is not fair that because I had so much more fun watching Poor Things and because I just watched it yesterday with my new friend, and just because we held hands the entire time that we watched it, whereas Anatomy of a Fall is not fun in any way. And I don't, but it doesn't feel right to have that count against it. But I will say, this is probably my 2 favorite movies from the year, and I'm having a very hard time. I guess ultimately, it is Poor Things. I mean, that's what my instincts are telling me. I think I expected it to be Anatomy of a Fall, but then when I went to actually say it, I was like, if I don't say Poor Things, I'm going to feel like I'm not being true to myself, which seems silly.
Like when you voted for Olivia, or you didn't vote for Olivia, but you should have voted for Olivia in the music bracket.
Yeah. That's
Nate, Poor Things or Anatomy of a Fall, if it mattered.
Yeah. I think the main thing for me is Poor Things is the movie that I'm gonna want to watch a bunch more times. Like, I want to go back to that world. And Anatomy of a Fall is deep and interesting, but it's also so like depressing in its own way that it's like, I'll probably watch that in like 5 years and be like, wow, this was great. But Poor Things is like kind of a romp in a cool way, and it's an emphatic statement, so I love it. Poor Things.
I hate that argument. It should have been Anatomy of a Fall. Our final should have been Killers of the Flower Moon versus Anatomy of a Fall. Instead, we have May December versus Poor Things.
we did it wrong.
What you guys don't know is Ryan has a bunch of side bets, and he's just losing thousands of dollars right now. That's why he's so upset.
We had the wrong opinions again on the podcast. Gah.
There's a guy with a baseball bat outside my room right now.
Ryan, are you even technically allowed to have a bad opinion on a podcast?
No. I signed a contract. Nate, here we go. May December versus Poor Things.
This is
For
hard.
the finals. This is it.
For the final, no, it's Poor Things. It's Poor Things. It's just Poor Things. It's so good. It's such a good movie. Every movie should be like this. It's so good.
Greg?
I think some of our picks in the last round people could question, but I think ultimately saying Poor Things is 2023's movie of the year is going to be a decision that I think really stands up to the test of time. And so I'm going to go with Poor Things.
Kate?
Explore Bloods in Me. Poor Things. Absolutely.
Michael?
Yeah, Lanthimos got his dog teeth in me like 12 years ago and has not let loose. And I don't know if a movie comes out by him, my vote will always be him.
That's sort of what I was talking about like 6 months ago, is that like we are... It's like, what if Charlie Kaufman wasn't entertaining? That's where we're at with Lanthimos. And Poor Things is the movie of the year.
Woo! We did it. I love it.
Agreed.
I'm so glad I went to see it yesterday. Oh my God, this would have sucked if I didn't.
Yeah.
Truly.
What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, it sounds good. I can't wait to see it,
Bird
guys.
bubbles.
Just constantly interrupting. What do you mean by this? Nate, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you?
You can find me over at the Debut Buddies podcast. And if you want to pick up some science fiction books, we publish at Spaceboy. So go to readspaceboy.com.
Can you explain the Debut Buddies podcast to us?
It's a fortnightly podcast about firsts. So we talk about the firsts of all kinds of things. We recently discussed the first Mamma Mia film, if you're interested in that. But we're also going into the first Tenacious D album soon, among other things. Yeah.
I think on the Mean Street show, you pitched your podcast, and you said that one of your episodes was about a sequel, because it was the debut of that particular sequel.
Yeah. It's the first second of a movie. Yeah, the first Paddington sequel was the movie, I believe, actually. Yeah. Which is great.
Funny.
Paddington 2.
Kate, where can we find you?
Not in many places. You can find me at kate.dellis.funny.kind on Instagram. Otherwise, I'm just here for the game.
What is your P.O. box?
I don't have one. But I do live in Boston, so, send up a flare. Maybe I'll see it.
Go to Boston, the person not screaming till they're red. That's Kate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Greg, thank you so much for being here. Do you feel good about Poor Things?
Yeah, no problem, man. I was happy to do it. Love to talk about movies with my guys.
Mike, do you have an announcement about the next season of Moody, the year, and the host?
It will be my lashing every week for 16 weeks, I will watch After Sun until I appreciate it. This is what I think. I'm announcing this for you?
Yeah, if you can say any word with space between that word and the next word, then you can definitely announce it.
I'm sorry. I've been podcasting for 6 hours straight. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, introducing the host of the 1984 Movie of the Year season. It's Ryan Reinelson.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I played Deadpool Nisson, and I'm very excited, guys. Nightmare on Elm Street, slam dunk, yes, this season.
Slam dunk, Ryan.
Johnny Depp dies. Ha-ha.
Ryan, if
Will
tonight is any indication, you're going to just absolutely host the doors off that season, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, getting points before the season starts. That is Greg.
Something to think about.
I will see you guys in 2024 when we talk about Madam Web versus the Mean Girls musical. For Kate, for Nate, for Mike, for Greg, I am Ryan. And remember, please, for the love of God, keep watching those movies.